AEGIS Wars, Chapter 38. Devon was aroused by the smell of smoke. He was instantly wide awake, heart racing. The morning sun was just beginning to shed its light upon the neighborhood, but only dark dread was in Devon's mind. He immediately concluded what was happening. Tartarus is attacking. They're burning down the house to get back at us for thwarting their plans. Beginning to run out of the house, the young man stopped and turned around. Where was Meta? He had not seen her next to the couch where she had been sleeping. Meta! Devon called, but there was no answer. He rushed into the kitchen, coughing due to the thick smoke. It was then that everything became clear. Meta! What are you doing? The girl was standing in front of the stove, oblivious to the noxious fumes emanating from the skillet in front of her. An apron was tied around her waist. She turned her head to look at Devon. Good morning. I wanted to have breakfast ready for you when you got up. Oh, you're making breakfast. That's great. There were 6 strips of bacon in the skillet, with the hue matching the cast iron pan in which they were being cooked. That's some, nice crispy bacon there, he observed. Meta smiled and removed them from the pan with a pair of tongs, placing them onto a paper towel-lined plate with other similarly charred meat. Devon grabbed a cookie sheet and began waving it forcefully in an attempt to clear the room of smoke. Why hasn't the smoke alarm gone off? He wondered. Then he stopped. There was a 9-volt battery sitting on the counter. It would appear that Meta had sabotaged the detector. It was when he walked back over to the stove to survey the damages that he noticed the eggs. They were a scrambled mess, with black scorched areas mixed in with the familiar yellow, and several large chunks of eggshell. Devon thought. Master Assassin, not Master Chef. How can I explain this to her gently? Before he could open his mouth to speak, the oven beeped in proclamation that something was finished cooking. Meta put on a chef's hat and oven mitts, and opened the oven door a crack. She peered inside for a moment, before throwing the door all the way open and leaning inside. Devon was genuinely concerned about what the amateur baker would emerge with when she popped out with a muffin tin in her hands. 12 lovely domed peaks rose out of the wells, sparkling with a sprinkled sugar topping. The aroma of blueberries and sugar suddenly began to overpower the smell of blackened bacon, and Devon's stomach started to growl. Those look amazing, he praised honestly. Did you do them all by yourself? Meta nodded and set the pan on a cooling rack. Yep, I found a recipe and did it like Amy showed me how to do the cupcakes. Nice job. Looks like you put a lot of effort into this. Should I go get Amy? Meta looked at the ground for a moment. Well... Then she looked up and nodded. Okay, we can eat together. Devon was puzzled at her hesitation, but soon forgot it as he went to awaken their surrogate mother. He returned in a few moments, alone. I couldn't get her up. She's still dead asleep. He dropped into a seat. Do you want to get started without her? Uh-huh. Meta nodded and commenced bringing the pre-dawn breakfast to the table. Although the eggs looked fairly questionable, and the bacon was probably beyond the point of being edible, Devon had to appreciate the hard work that the girl had put into the whole ordeal. However, the muffins truly appeared to be perfect. There was no need to fabricate anything about that. He grabbed one from the rack. This is really awesome. Thanks, Meta. It only took one big bite of the soft muffin to find out how surprisingly delicious it was. He somewhat expected the sugar and salt to have been reversed or something, but the confection seems to be impeccable. Not bad. I'm impressed. The baked good was very moist and fluffy, not too sugary as to overpower the blueberries, but still sweet enough to be pleasing to the taste buds. Meta also took a muffin. She was about to stuff the whole thing in her mouth, but then stopped. Instead, the girl began nibbling on it like a little mouse. Devon nearly choked on his breakfast. Sometime later, they had finished eating. The muffins were superb, and even the eggs, with a little dexterous avoidance of shells and charred spots, were not half bad. The bacon was beyond repair, though. Nearly everything was gone when Amy emerged from the hallway. Oh, good morning, she mumbled sleepily. If I would have known you were here, I would have gotten up. Sorry, you just looked really tired. I couldn't wake you, Devon apologized. It's okay. Amy yawned, stretching her arms above her head. The relieved woman sat down in a seat at the table. When you left to fight that armored tank and didn't come back, I was afraid that you'd been killed out there. I couldn't sleep a wink that night. She sat in silence for a moment. I was up most of last night worrying too, but eventually I fell asleep. Devon apologized once again. I'm so sorry we worried you. I wish that we could have told you we were all right, but I had no way to call. Yeah, sorry to worry you. That's all right. Her lips formed a sincere smile. I'm just glad to see you're safe. By the way, she said, changing the subject, how did your breakfast go? There wasn't much left. Just some blackened bacon, the rejected parts of the eggs, and one muffin. Sorry for smoking the house and taking the battery out of the smoke alarm. It was good. Yeah, Devon hesitantly replied. I don't care that it didn't turn out the way you expected, Amy reassured the aspiring cook while picking up the last remaining muffin. The important thing is that you seem to have a desire to do things in the kitchen. The more experienced chef took a bite of the blueberry goodness. This isn't half bad. You have real promise. I'm sure you'll learn really fast. Meta looked excited. You think so? I'll help you. You'll be a great cook in no time. Hymenordus was not pleased. Upon returning to Tartarus headquarters in the escape pod, he immediately began planning his cruel retribution. Is Echidna ready for deployment? He demanded from a nearby analyst. Well, yes. Dr. Forcus completed all of its genetic work before he, died, and the cybernetics division is just now finishing its mechanical features. Fine. Prepare to initiate the Echidna project as soon as possible. The world will know my wrath. Nordis continued into his office and stood calmly. There was nothing to worry about. There were better versions of the Typhon being constructed. The Echidna would eliminate any semblance of resistance that anyone could offer, and the ones who had proved to be a thorn in his side were most likely dead. However, he could not discount the possibility that those two brats had somehow evaded death again. It did not matter. If they tried to get in his way again, there would be no surviving. Echidna was the mother of all monsters, and everyone who opposed it would either become one of its children or be dead. While the females were working in the kitchen, Devon turned on the television to see if there was any news about Tartarus activity. So far, there were no recent stories of any current attacks. If only Salazar would have included the charger with his computer. There is likely a great deal of helpful information on that machine which could make the resistance against Tartarus much easier. Unfortunately, Devon was out of batteries. Even using the makeshift power source, getting data from the laptop was highly tedious, and he feared that it would damage the internal mechanisms. Just then, something came to his mind. He ascended to the attic and began to reverently look through Arihi's things. Bingo. Devon returned with a small Bible, New King James Version. He had a feeling that she would have one, based on information he had been able to gather about the girl. The first couple of days, Devon had felt an unquenchable fire for the Bible and learning more about God. However, lately had been so busy with saving the world and stuff that it had slipped his mind. How could the truest words ever written be in an easily accessible book, and he not take the time to read it? Sorry, Lord, he silently repented. I wish that I would spend more time with you. Make yourself more real to me. Bible in hand, he sat back down on the couch. Although he did not really expect the mysteries of the universe to suddenly become clear, it could not hurt to at least read about the one who had created the mysteries in the first place. Devon flipped to the book of John again. It was the first book that he had gone through, but it was unlikely that it had been thoroughly exhausted. John chapter 1. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things were made through him, and without him nothing was made that was made. In him was life, and the life was the light of men. And the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not comprehend it. Devon shook his head sharply to try to clear it, and tried again. Everything that he read made him think more of Meta. Why could he not get her out of his mind? Verse 3, all things were made through him, and without him nothing was made that was made. Did this apply to artificially created life forms like her? Was she an aberration of creation, an abomination made by man to defy God to his face? Or was she just another one of his children in a different form? Verse 4, in him was life, and the life was the light of men. Did Meta have that life? Was the light of men inside of her at all? That didn't take long. What a confusing mess. Going for a quiet, meditative walk to clear his head sounded like a really good idea. The young man was about to head for the park when he heard his name called from the kitchen. "Devon, will you come here for a minute?" came Amy's voice. The young man put down the Bible and heeded the summons. "Yes, ma'am?" "I'm teaching Meta how to make chicken paprikash for dinner tonight, but we don't actually have any chicken," she explained. "I've learned my lesson about going myself and leaving the kitchen unsupervised. So, I'm sending you and Meta to the store to pick up a package of chicken quarters." Chicken quarters? Do they have Colonel Sanders instead of George Washington on the front, and a chicken instead of an eagle on the back? Ha ha, very funny. Devon was genuinely confused. Seriously, what are chicken quarters? "Oh yeah," Amy chuckled. "Sorry, sometimes I forget that not everyone has as much cooking experience. Chicken quarters are chicken legs, including the thigh and drumstick." "Ah, gotcha," he supposed. "There's just one problem. Mr. Beard hates us. Well, me anyway. He thinks I'm some sort of hoodlum. I doubt he'd acknowledge us as human beings, much less let us into his store. Should we perform a stealth infiltration?" "I don't think that'll be necessary," Amy responded, smiling. "Meta, come with me. Devon, take a shower. It's time for some camouflage." While Devon reluctantly headed for the shower, Meta was led to the attic. The females began to look through boxes of clothing that used to belong to Arihi. "Let's see, what do we have here?" Amy wondered. "We need something that will keep Mr. Beard from recognizing you. Ah, here we go." The woman held up an article of clothing. "What do you think about this?" Meta did not visibly react. Internally, her feelings were considerably stronger. Gaudy, hideous, scary. What the heck? "I say, you try to hide in plain sight. I know it's probably not your style, but you've got to try it. It's the only way to get the ingredients for tonight." Meta was silent, but after a time, she nodded. "Let's do it." Downstairs, Devon was truly enjoying his hygienic activity. "I think this is the first shower I've taken since leaving AEGIS. Holy cow, this is great." After getting out of the shower, he began to dress himself with the clothes his surrogate mother had provided. She had given him some of Ilhala's old things. The man probably had 6 inches and 100 pounds on him, and it showed in the raiment. Thank God for belts. Upon exiting the bathroom, he came into the hallway just as Amy and Meta were coming down the stairs. Meta was wearing an extremely bright pink hooded sweatshirt with the word "love" written in large white block letters. She did not look too happy. Meta? Are you okay?" "I think it's burning my skin." "No one will expect you guys to be making a big, obvious entrance. This is perfect." Amy gloated about her idea. "Are you okay with this, Meta?" Meta nodded. "I'll do what it takes." "And now for you, Devon," the adult woman continued. "You're next." Crap. "Aren't these ridiculous bed sheets enough disguise?" he complained. "Do you want Mr. Beard to throw you out of the store?" "No," he mumbled crabbily. "Do what you need to do." Amy proceeded to drag Devon into the bathroom and shut the door behind them. Aegis Wars, Chapter 39. Well, this is preposterous. The two walked along the sunny road on the way to the grocery store. Meta's fluorescent pink sweatshirt reflected the light like a rose-colored beacon. Devon moved along beside her. In addition to the baggy clothes, Amy had augmented the disguise by also modifying his face. She had taken a trimming of his hair and stuck it together to form a bushy mustache. If there's any possible way we can infiltrate the store undetected, I'm still taking it. Devon felt so goofy, in fact, that they took the long way to the store around the back of the town near the park where they had fought the Gorgons. Ortontown was built around a small, naturally occurring stream. Although it was not large enough to support a very great population, it gave life to the village, and there was a verdant preserve which surrounded it called Garrison Park. It possessed a walking track and a small picnic area. There were also trails which went through a wooded area encircling the stream. Before the construction of the aqueduct, Ortontown was the oasis of the zone. Kamingo was located about 5 miles south of the small village, and upon its completion, Ortontown was all but forgotten. The longer path to the store was filled with silence. As the two walked along in the gorgeous day, Devon was feeling extremely stressed. Although he was apprehensive about their mission, the worry that troubled his soul was from a far deeper concern. Sweat was moistening his hairline and chest, and it had nothing to do with the warm sun. How do you ask someone if they're a human being? He pondered in turmoil. Am I totally crazy? I've never felt awkward around a Meta before. Why am I feeling this? What am I supposed to do? It was fairly apparent that Meta did not sense any discomfort in the air. She was calmly watching several viceroy butterflies flutter about in the sun. Wow, I've never seen these before, she thought in wonder. After walking for a bit longer, a pair of small foxes tumbled out of the trees. They were wrestling playfully, enjoying the beautiful day. Meta's face broke into a radiant smile. Oh, look at that, Devon cried, his brain glad for an excuse to think about something else. Aren't they cute? Adorable, the girl concurred. It immediately occurred to the young man that it was not too far in the past when his companion had shown no recognition or response to any stimuli such as this. She had certainly come a long way. The humans watched the little canids play around for a bit longer before they ran back into the brush. The remainder of the journey seemed to be of a much lighter tone. Meta walked with a bit of a sway in her step, almost skipping. Even Devon seemed to have forgotten the awkwardness of the first half of the trip. Foxes, 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 foxes. Eventually, they made it to the grocery store. Devon pulled Meta down behind a parked car at the corner, and they reconnoitered the situation. Mr. Beard was nowhere to be seen from the outside of the shop, but he could easily be lurking anywhere inside. Okay, here's the plan, Devon whispered. We'll sneak around the back way and infiltrate using the employee entrance. Once inside, we'll keep a low profile, find the chicken, check out, and get the hell out of here. He scratched his mustache. Sound good? Yes, Meta nodded. They began closing in on the store in a crouching position. Staying out of sight of the front of the store, they snuck around to the hidden rear of the building and pressed up against the wall. There, Devon approached a door marked Employees Only. His hand grabbed the knob and tried to jiggle it. Locked. The boy began looking around until he found a wire coat hanger in the dumpster nearby. In a moment, its original shape was modified, and he attempted to pick the lock with the improvised tool. Before he could force it open, Meta wedged her little fingernail into the door crack above the locking mechanism. She twisted her hand until it was horizontal, and the gap was as wide as her pinky. Then she inserted her thumb vertically and turned it to widen the gap even more. Finally, she squeezed her hand into the crack and began to bend her fingers, forcing it back farther. The door squeaked and squealed in protest as it was pressed against the opposite frame. After intense effort, the gap was wider than the deadbolt and could easily be opened. When Meta released her force, the door sprung back to its normal shape. Devon's mouth hung open. How did you do that? That's how I got out of my cell at Tartarus. After ensuring that the coast was clear, the two crept into the dank recesses of the grocery store. Within the employee entrance were stacks of stock items, ready to be transferred to the shelves when customers bought the existing products. They also passed the employee break room, which consisted of a 4-foot square nook in the wall with a couple of paper Subway napkins and an empty salt shaker on a card table. There was a pair of saloon-style doors leading into the customer area of the retailer. Devon paused and took a deep breath. Here we go. They plunged forward and hustled through the store. Where would they keep the chicken? Devon wondered aloud. I don't know. Maybe by the ducks and geese. It's possible this place is alphabetized. Then it would be by Chinese food and chili and maybe cheese. Boy, I hope the store doesn't use that stupid Dewey Decimal System like the library. The amateur shoppers traversed the aisles with no luck finding the poultry. After a time, Devon realized that Meta was not following him. Where did she go? He backtracked his steps and found her in the baking supply section, staring at the sugar, flour, and a variety of spices. Meta, Devon whispered harshly. We don't have time for that. We need to get the chicken and get out before Mr. Beard finds us. She nodded disappointedly and followed him out of the aisle. Like a child in the toy section, her gaze remained on the baking supplies. Eventually, they made it to the refrigeration cases and struck meat gold at last. Devon frantically scanned the product until he found chicken. What was it? Chicken dimes? No. Chicken nickels? No. Chicken... Devon desperately tried to remember exactly what they were dispatched to obtain. Here it is. Meta held up the last package of chicken legs. Chicken quarters, of course. Devon took the 3-pound package. Great work. Let's get out of here. They rapidly made their way to the checkout lanes and threw the meat on the conveyor belt. The elderly cashier lady gave them a strange look. Stop being in such a hurry, young man, she scolded, and no running in the store. Well, I'm sorry, but my life is in danger here, Devon whispered. Oh, pfft, your life is in danger. You're not fooling anyone. And you know what? You're making my life really difficult. First, you take the last package of chicken quarters, so I have to go restock it. Now, you're making me check you out, so I can't restock it. Next, you probably want me to take it out to your car. Look, I'm not trying to make trouble. I just want to get my chicken, and... While Devon did a verbal battle with a grumpy cashier, Meta scoped the checkout aisle snacks. Taste the rainbow? Hungry? Grab a Snickers? A rattly milk carton? M's? A baby named Ruth? How strange. The argument with the older woman was suddenly interrupted with a large clattering noise. Devon and the cashier simultaneously turned their heads to look at the source. Meta had dropped an armload of every kind of candy on the conveyor and waited expectantly for it to carry the sugary treats forward. Devon looked helplessly at the cashier, then at the candy. Meta, he moaned. The stressed-out boy reached in his pocket and pulled out the $10 bill which Amy had given them. Leaning over, he observed the package of chicken to cost $8.96. His eyes quickly looked from the pile of candy to the glowering woman, then to Meta. Meta, I can only afford one. Pick whichever one you want to try the most. She thought for a moment, then handed Devon a Twix bar. This one. Okay. He turned back to the angry cashier with pleading eyes. Will you please? She grabbed the Twix out of his hands and scanned it and the chicken before stuffing them both into a plastic grocery bag. Here are your damn groceries. Now get the hell out of here before you make more work for me. She shoved the bag into his chest. Devon left the 10 and ran. Thank you. Keep the change. As they made a dash for the door, Mr. Beard came around the corner right in their path. They quickly decreased their pace and tried to go unnoticed, but it was too late. The manager walked up to them with a big smile. Good morning. How are you doing? We're fine, thanks. Devon lowered his head and kept walking. Mr. Beard stood right in front of Meta. What's your name, young lady? Uh-oh, Devon? She nervously looked at Devon. Shoot, this isn't good. He stepped over next to Meta. This is, AEGIS. She can't talk right now. You know, that cold going around. Mr. Beard's face lit up. AEGIS, that's right. I haven't seen you here in years. He tilted his head a little. You sure look different, but hey, time does that. The man turned to Devon. Then who might you be? I'm her uncle, Marvin. Never met you. Must be from out of town. Yeah, just visiting my niece here. It's, her birthday. Well, happy birthday! Mr. Beard seemed to buy it. How old are you now? Suddenly, Devon felt a sneeze coming on. He curled his toes and tried to stifle it, but it was too late. His nose unleashed a gale-force blast, which sent the phony mustache flying through the air. It smacked with a charming, cartoon-like sound against Mr. Beard's balding forehead. The manager glared, seething at Devon. You know, that old cult going around. You're that little ruffian from before. I thought I told you to get out and never come back. Oh, yeah. I remember you saying something like, Meta, run! Devon pushed past the large man and sprinted out the door, Meta following on his heels. While running, Devon looked back over his shoulder to see a shopping cart flying through the air after them. Mr. Beard had hurled it a good 200 feet. The runaways dove out of the way of the ballistic projectile. Stay out of my store! The angry manager screamed after them, shaking his fist. No problemo, Devon muttered as he and his accomplice returned to the way they had taken to the store behind the main part of town. After recovering their breath, Meta took the bag and fished the Twix bar out of it. She held the plastic bag with the chicken in one hand and excitedly opened the candy with her teeth. Wow, there are 2 in one package? She marveled at her good luck for a moment. She then smiled and offered the left Twix to Devon. Hey, thanks, Meta. He took it gratefully and took a bite out of the left Twix with a splendid crunch. Of course she would share. That's just the way she was. They walked along the rarely used back road for a while, until Meta spotted a small dark form up a little ways. She started to run ahead to see what it was. Devon chased after her a few steps behind. When he caught up to her, she was standing over the still body of one of the foxes from earlier. It was lying in the middle of the road, dead. The other was nowhere to be seen. What happened? Meta was struck by the tragedy. Devon looked at it sadly for a moment. It must have gotten hit by a car. He shook his head. Poor thing. Why did it have to die? It didn't do anything wrong. Devon put a hand on her shoulder. Come on, Meta. There's nothing we can do now. The girl didn't budge. Devon sighed. Death is a part of life. It shouldn't be, but it is. Sometimes we have to kill too. I'm not happy about all this death either, but we have to move on. Meta looked at the chicken in the bag in her hand, then handed it to Devon and walked on ahead. The young man stared after her, wondering what just happened. Upon reaching home, Devon delivered the chicken to Amy. Here it is, at great cost to us, he said, setting it on the table. Nice job. Did everything go okay? She responded, removing the chicken from the bag. Don't ask. Devon walked back out into the living room before turning around and sticking his head back into the kitchen. Say, did you happen to launder my clothes? Indeed I did. Awesome. I need to get out of these tarps. After he changed back into his normal attire, he continued into the room with the television to check if there were any updates on Tartarus. Still nothing. Amy turned her attention to her apprentice. Are you ready to help finish the chicken paprikash, Meta? Meta nodded and reported to the stove where the head chef was waiting. While the surrogate mother and daughter were working in the culinary arts, Devon sat on the couch, thinking. His mind was churning to devise a test for Meta. How does one test for a person's humanity? What can humans do that nothing else can? Something an animal or monster cannot do? Maybe poetry? No, I can't write poetry worth crap. That would mean I'm not a human. Maybe language skills? No, there are animals which can communicate in their own sort of language. Problem solving? There are cats that learn how to open doors and birds that use tools. Maybe some kind of artistic skill? Again, that would mean I'm less than human. I have no artistic talent. Devon sat thoughtfully for quite a while. What makes us what we are? What makes a human a human? He agonized over what should have been a simple question for quite some time. Then, he knew. It was less like the tiny sudden flash of a light bulb, but more like the slow, all-encompassing illumination of a sunrise. Love. The capability to love with every cell in one's living body is a uniquely human characteristic. Only a species with sentience and free will could do something so stupid, illogical, and self-destructive. How can I test if a person is able to love, though? I have no idea. As he considered how to solve this dilemma, the sound of his name being called from the kitchen snapped him back to reality. Devon, come here. We need a guinea pig. Uh-oh. Coming. Devon quietly sat down at the table, where the cooks had already placed a pot of reddish, stew-like chicken and a dish full of noodles. They watched him intently as he served himself a scoop of the pasta and ladled some of the Hungarian chicken over top. Geez, I feel like I'm on a stage and forgot to wear pants, he thought as a wave of self-consciousness washed over him like hot magma. Every move that I make will be judged. Attempting to avoid eye contact, he stabbed a piece of the tender chicken and some noodles with a fork and transferred it to his mouth. The only sound in the room was that of his mastication. Hey, this is really good, Devon proclaimed to break the silence. I've never had anything like it. Meta looked supremely relieved. Whew, better than my spaghetti. Did you hear that, Meta? Amy exclaimed. He likes it. You did a great job. Yes, thank you for all of your help. Meta nodded. As Devon continued to maw on the chicken paprikash, Amy and Meta also filled their plates. Devon couldn't help but notice that Meta was only eating the noodles and did not even sample the chicken. What's the matter, Meta? Do you not like your chicken? Meta shook her head. No, it's not that. It's just, I cause enough death as it is. I don't want to kill or eat anything more than I have to. At least until this war against Tartarus is over, and I don't have to kill anymore. Well, Devon somewhat understood, despite the lack of verbal communication. "It's up to you. Thank you for the awesome food, though." After dinner, the boy helped clean up the dishes. When they were nearly finished, Amy left to go to the bathroom. Devon and Meta were left alone. He washed and she dried. Ordinarily, Devon was a very calculating individual, thinking about any possible outcome and how to respond to different theoretical situations. However, this time his mind was in a fog and his thoughts jumbled in a confused mess. "Well, here it goes. Time for the test." "Meta?" Her big, purple eyes looked at him. The dark, somewhat disobedient hair did not quite reach her shoulders. Any chance of Devon forming a clear inquiry was lost when she rubbed a splash of soap bubbles from her snoot and smiled. Is there anything well, do you feel really strongly about anything? Is it just me, or is it extremely hot in this kitchen? Like, more than just, never mind." Scratching his head awkwardly, he retreated from the house like a scared cat. Meta gazed after him. What the... AEGIS Wars, Chapter 40. The next morning, the sun rose over the small town with a cheerful glow. The remainder of the previous night passed uneventfully, but everyone in the homestead inexplicably slept quite late. By the time Devon stepped out the door into the driveway, the sky was fully lit, and the day was beginning to warm. He stretched his arms and legs, and pondered what to do on that day. Meta joined him outside. She had changed out of her fluorescent attire, and was wearing a plain white t-shirt underneath a plaid-patterned open overshirt. "Good morning, Devon." "Oh, good morning, Meta. Did you sleep okay?" The girl nodded. Just then, a beat-up old Jeep Cherokee screeched into the driveway next door, and their neighbors, the Resendes, piled out in a frantic hurry. The Hispanic family paid no attention to Devon and Meta at all, and attempted to get into their house as fast as they could. "Grandpa, you can! Let's get out of here! What do we need? Dios mío! Dios mío! Vámonos! Vámonos!" Devon raised his voice. Hey, what's going on?" While the majority of the family milled about, one of the girls, Stacy, replied to him. "Didn't you hear? Calmingo's under attack! Nowhere is safe anymore!" She tried to get away, but Devon continued prodding for information. "Attacked by what? What's going on?" Stacy's sister Anna popped out of the house. "Come on, hermanita! We need to get out of here!" "Please tell me what's happening," Devon besought her. Anna quickly gave brief details. "There are like these crazy monsters in the city. They're gonna, destroy everything, then come after this town." The entire family went inside to get their most important possessions. Devon turned to Meta. "Tartarus. Meta, we need to get to the city. Grab your sword and meet me at the car." "Okay. Where is it?" When they ran toward the house, Devon put his hands to his head. "Shoot! I left it at Tartarus' hangar! We've got no wheels! Now what?" Meta pointed to the Resendes Jeep. "Maybe we can hitch a ride." Devon looked over at their neighbors. They seemed really freaked out and probably would not want to go anywhere near the city. However, there was not a wide variety of choices in the situation. "Okay, we'll ask them. I hope they'll be brave enough to head back there." The two ran into the house to get their weapons. They made it back and stood in the Resendes driveway just before the Hispanic family came back out to retreat. When they did, Devon intercepted them. "I need to go to Calmingo. Can you please get me there?" The Resendes parents spoke no English, but they understood his gestures. "Este tonto quiere morir, como un bobo muy torpe." He exasperatedly repeated himself. "I don't know any Spanish. No comprendo. I need to, go to El Ciudad and kill, los monsters." They laughed condescendingly and waved him away as they climbed into the Jeep. Then the younger Resendes came out, Anna and Stacy, and their older brother David. "Hey," Devon pleaded, "I need to get to the city. I have to fight Tartarus before they kill more people." David pushed past his sisters. "Man, this guy's stupid. What's one guy gonna do against an army? Let him get himself killed. He doesn't have to involve us." The girls hesitated, though. "I don't know, Devon. This guy, seems like he might be able to do something. Maybe he has a chance." Devon's face showed genuine desperation. "Please, I have to fight them. Who knows how many people will die if someone doesn't stand. You can just drop me off, then run to Mexico or wherever you're headed." The girls looked sympathetic to his cause and ran over to the Jeep. They jabbered in Spanish with their parents for a minute. The conversation grew increasingly animated, involving some presumably colorful Spanish vocabulary words. Devon and Meta moved almost imperceptibly, like glaciers, beside the vehicle. David did not seem happy at all. Eventually, Anna and Stacy translated the results of the conversation. "Okay, our parents say that we can give you a ride, under one condition, and I quote, 'as long as the little shit doesn't fart in the car.'" "No problem. Gracias." Devon expressed his gratitude. "We can't let those freaking weirdos tell us what to do," David continued to complain. "They're gonna get us killed just because they have a death wish. Are you all freaking stupid?" The young man ignored the protests and brought up a potential complication. "But there's one problem. The Jeep can only seat 6. The battered Jeep began to pull out of the driveway. David was left standing outside his house, cussing up a storm and stomping in anger. Devon sat in the front, in between Señor y Señora Resendez, while Meta sat in the back between Anna and Stacy. As the car passed by Amy's house, Devon suddenly realized something. "Nuts! I forgot to tell Amy we're leaving. She might think we've been killed or abducted or something." Thinking quickly, he reached across the driver's body and honked a loud blast of the horn. The Jeep slowed down for a moment. Just as they began to leave, Amy's face appeared in a window. Devon and Meta waved enthusiastically from inside the vehicle. The woman's face turned to an expression of horror, and she grabbed a telephone and began dialing. Uh-oh. The two adventurers began waving in a different manner, attempting to tell her that they were fine, and there was no need to call the police. As Amy faded from sight, they could only hope that she did not believe they were being kidnapped by a gang of Mexicans. After the 5-mile drive to Calmingo, their friendly neighbors dropped Devon and Meta off at the outskirts of the city. "Buena suerte, amigos," the elderly man said. "Good luck, guys," Anna added. Devon and Meta waved as the Jeep rapidly disappeared. "Thanks for the lift," Devon called. "Okay, now to the subject at hand." The two began to carefully survey their surroundings. The area was very silent due to the warnings for all civilians to flee or remain indoors. Because of this, the sound of a commotion could be heard to the southeast several blocks. They made their way toward the destructive noise. Remaining out of sight, the two approached the square of the city near the giant fountain atop the aqueduct. There, they observed a squad of Tartarus ground troops and several gigantes. The monsters were armed with enormous Vulcan cannons, ordinarily reserved for installment on anti-tank aircraft and artillery. The human soldiers appeared to be setting up a perimeter and positioning the gigantes in such a way as to defend from attack. Devon and Meta remained concealed behind a building. They aren't causing widespread destruction, Devon considered. It's as though they're defending something. There were a few bodies of police and civilians who would not cooperate, but the invaders did not seem to be advancing. Yet. "Let's take out as many as we can without being seen," Meta thought, her grip tightening around the hilt of her katana. "Are you ready?" Devon whispered. Meta nodded. Slinking in between structures, the assassins approached a sentry who was separated from the others. Devon's strong arm yanked him off the street and banged his head against a wall. The man dropped in the cold. The two were north of Tartarus Formation, and so began to stalk southward toward the center. Their progress was hindered by a pair of patrolling soldiers. Devon backtracked along his path, while Meta silently scaled a small bar and grill. When the enemy passed near it, she leapt down and terminated the threat with a draw of her blade. Continuing on, they observed several groups of men coming in their direction. Had they been detected? Devon signaled Meta to keep close, and he led them on a complicated path through alleyways and around small buildings. As they crouched in the shadows of an optometry center on a side street, the soldiers passed by without turning. Phew, lost them. Suddenly, they heard huge thundering footsteps behind them. Whirling around, Devon saw an unarmed gigante charging toward them. He was barely able to roll out of the way of the bull charge, which knocked a chunk out of the building they were using as cover. Meta jumped to dodge and delivered a forceful slash with her sword to the beast's back. It roared in pain, but the powerful attack did not even break the skin. Of course, Devon thought, that hide which can stop bullets is tough enough to resist all but the strongest of attacks. While Meta was evading being crushed by mighty smashing strokes, Devon called out to her. Meta, the blood on your fangs lets you penetrate its skin. Use the fangs. The girl nodded and sheathed her sword. Doing a back handspring to buy herself space, she attempted to deploy her lethal blades. Nothing happened. She was puzzled and tried to push them out again. There was an internal muscle attached to the base of her implanted blades, which she used to force them out through her wrists, but for some reason, she could not get them to move. What's wrong? Why won't they come out? Meta thought, looking at her hands. This has never happened before. She exerted herself more and almost hyperventilated into a panic. The giant bore down on her, but she still could not force her blades out. Meta was almost in tears as her body would not obey her. They won't work! They won't work! Meta! Devon yelled. He sprinted forward and pulled his friend out of the way of the charging creature by her arm. They were both tossed by the force of the gigantic swinging arm. Devon yanked Meta behind a dumpster and asked if she was all right. Her heart was still racing, and her eyes were wide. I don't know. I don't know what's going on. All of a sudden, their cover was lifted off the ground by huge arms. The giant roared as it prepared to crush them with the dumpster. Devon tried to shield Meta from certain impact. Suddenly, the monster was pulverized by a torrent of heavy artillery fire. It groaned when the high-impact armor-piercing rounds tore through its tough skin and shot it dead. Devon turned to see where the attack had come from. On the main road was an armored car with a Gatling gun mounted to a rotating turret. AEGIS! Devon almost cheered. They had been working to evacuate citizens from the area, and just then had been able to enter the battle. AEGIS had also generated an electromagnetic fence several blocks down, essentially creating a contained war zone in which to battle Tartarus. Okay, Meta, I elect that we leave the fighting to them. They hid in an alley where they could observe the battle without being in too much danger. AEGIS deployed a number of armored vehicles, in addition to foot soldiers. Shots were exchanged from both sides. The Gigantes were very formidable with their ridiculous firepower being held like a rifle, and they cut down AEGIS agents and vehicles alike. An AEGIS aircraft swooped in and launched a firebound rocket on one of the monsters. It erupted in flame, and the concussive force blew it to pieces. The battle was very evenly matched, and it was unclear which side would come out victorious. All of a sudden, a large mysterious shadow appeared. It whipped extremely fast through the air with a serpentine motion, like an enormous snake or dragon. Devon's eyes could barely follow it as it struck down a number of Aegis soldiers and flipped an armored car. The men fired their machine guns at the form, but if they hit it, there was no visible effect. The creature rose up in the center of the battlefield, in front of the giant aqueduct, and paused in the light. Its true, terrible appearance was finally revealed. The body was that of a young woman. If it were to stand on two legs, it would probably reach between 7 and 8 feet tall. However, standing was impossible. From the waist down, its body resembled what could be best described as a gigantic metal snake. The long, serpent-like body was made of many articulating robotic pieces, giving it excellent flexibility. There appeared to be some kind of blue energy being emitted from between the joints, allowing it to hover in place. The human part of the creature was unclad, but a metallic armor reached up to the front to cover the breast area and in the back up to the shoulder blades. Its strong arms had huge steel claws on the fingers, and a second pair of similarly armed robotic limbs emerged from the cybernetic section near the middle of the spine. The female face was not visible at this distance, but the black hair was long and unkempt. All in all, it was a horrifying and formidable monster. Echidna. Devon recognized the creature from skimming through that Greek mythology book back in the library. A horrible beast, with the head and torso of a woman, and the body and tail of a snake. It was the mother of all monsters. The mother of all monsters? A disturbing reality began to dawn in Devon's mind. This could be... Aegis Wars, Chapter 41. Aegis forces began to concentrate their attention on this new threat, and their jet swooped in to take a shot. Devon looked out into the main street to see a soldier preparing a special weapon to fire. He recognized this device, the Artemis. It was capable of firing an enormously powerful rocket, essentially a miniature warhead, which could annihilate a small building down to the foundation. Nothing could survive a direct hit from the Artemis. Just as the man was about to launch the missile, Echidna emitted an ear-splitting scream. Suddenly, the jet dropped out of the sky and crashed into the ground with a huge fireball. Simultaneously, the launcher of the Artemis rocket was deactivated, and all of the armored vehicles coasted to a halt. What had happened? Devon looked around the battlefield, trying to determine the effects of the screech. The Gigantes slowly began to fall to their knees, until they were all lying dead on the ground. The electrical cardiac amplifiers must have been terminated, along with Aegis equipment. It must have been an EMP, Devon considered. He looked around at the nearby buildings. Sure enough, all the lights were out. Aegis' electric barrier was also shut down. Upon activation of an electromagnetic pulse, all electronic devices within the affected area had been deactivated. No form of electric technology was left functional. The technological capital of the country had just been sent back to the Stone Age. With Aegis electricity out, the battle turned in favor of Tartarus. Echidna swooped in and began to slaughter the remaining troops. Whipping its massive tail and slashing with razor-sharp claws, the poor men fell very quickly. The monster also demonstrated the ability to spit venom which could corrode metal as well as human flesh. In a short time, all the Aegis resistance had been killed brutally. Devon could not take his eyes off the monster. There was something about it, something terrifying. Obviously, it was a powerhouse, but more than that, it reminded him of his nightmares. It took all of his strength to silence the quivering fear inside. The boy continued watching Echidna as he spoke to his partner. Okay, Meta, be careful. This thing is deadly. If we're careful and get close enough, we might be able to find a weakness, right? Meta? He turned, and she was nowhere to be found. The young man frantically looked left and right, but could not see his companion. Why would she pick now to disappear? Then he spotted her. The girl was standing atop a building on the far side of the monster. Meta, no! Devon called, but there was nothing he could do to stop her. She leapt into the air toward Echidna, with her hand gripping the hilt of her weapon. Just as she was about to slash at the head of the monster, it whipped around to face her. Meta froze in response to what she saw and flew past Echidna's head without striking. Meta landed on the ground in the street, slightly dazed. She turned around to face her enigmatic foe, only to be suddenly impaled on his razor claws. Meta! Devon screamed and ran from his hiding place toward the gory scene. Meta gasped in intense pain. Two of the steel claws passed all the way through her body. Pushing on Echidna's hand, she was able to slowly push herself back until the scimitar-like blades exited her body. The creature smirked a hideous grin as it seemed to enjoy watching her struggle. The instant Meta had freed herself from the impalement, Echidna made a powerful sweeping slash with another of its arms. Devon almost reached her when she was hurled down the abandoned street from the force of the second blow. Several ribbons of her blood were thrown into the air from the lacerations made by the Echidna's attack, and they splattered across the young man. Immediately, the ichor began to sizzle as it corroded his jacket. Frantically, he pulled it off and threw it aside. He rushed after his wounded friend when he saw that the toxic blood had gotten on the skin of his arms. A jolt of fear pulsed through his nervous system as he frantically tried to wipe it off with his hands. To his surprise, it was not dissolving his flesh. In fact, the viscous fluid came off easily when he tried to remove it. Devon was too concerned about the poor girl whose lifeblood had just been spilled to give much thought to its lack of effect on him. With all the speed he could muster, he continued after Meta. Echidna had slithered through the air like quicksilver to where its victim had fallen. It landed beside Meta, wrapped its long tail around her, and lifted her up to its face. Meta was unable to struggle against the titanium constriction and looked back weakly into her enemy's eyes. Mother. Sparks flew between matching violet eyes, one pair filled with killing intent, the other with sadness and confusion. They stared for several long seconds, before Echidna raised two deadly fingers up to Meta's neck, preparing to decapitate her as though using a giant pair of scissors. The girl continued to look helplessly into the face of the monster, waiting for death to come. In the nick of time, Devon leapt into the air and smashed Echidna in the face with a swing of a street sign which had been ripped from the ground during the battle with Aegis. The creature reeled backward as a result of the blow. It recovered and roared a blood-curdling cry. Devon had landed and was aiming his pistol up at the monster in preparation. The moment it roared at him, he fired several shots into its mouth. Echidna screeched in pain. Its mighty tail dropped Meta and simultaneously swung in a wide arc to strike its new attacker. Devon was flung backward nearly 100 feet until he crashed through the glass windows of a grocery store. Echidna did not pursue, but thrashed about in pain from the bullets contacting its more vulnerable mouth. Meta stumbled from where she had fallen and, holding her hand to her stomach, collapsed and hiding behind the corner of a building. She breathed heavily and closed her eyes, concentrating on regenerating her injuries. Although not fully recovered, she stood up after a few moments and limped in pursuit of the monster. Meta's mind was full of concerning thoughts about what she had seen. Arihi? Was that monster Arihi? My genetic template? Tartarus must have finished with her and turned her into that. That's horrible. The girl increased her walking speed after Echidna. My mother. I don't know how, but I have to stop her from causing more destruction. After a time, she spotted the beast. It had recovered from the damage and was moving toward the fountain area of the aqueduct. The water was no longer able to eject high into the air as a result of the EMP, but it still flowed down the trough to the purification center. Grimacing through her injuries, Meta sprinted toward Echidna and quickly caught up to it. She leapt into the air above and slashed downward across its back. The huge snake woman crashed to the ground and immediately sprung back up. The slash had left a painful stripe across its back, but once again failed to penetrate the skin. Echidna struck with several of its arms to eviscerate its attacker. Meta dodged each one, and on the final strike unleashed a downward cut at the monster's wrist. The force would have cut through a tree branch and was successful in breaking the ulna, but did not accomplish the desired result of removing the hand. Echidna whipped its tail to hit her, but a high jump-like maneuver was enough to evade. This movement tore open Meta's still healing wounds. She winced in pain, and her mobility was severely cut. Before Meta could counterattack, the Ophidian beast flew up into the air and began spitting large venomous projectiles down at her. Meta clumsily avoided them. She then jumped and grabbed onto its tail. Maybe I can run along its tail to get some more vulnerable areas. This did not work. Echidna cracked his tail like a whip and flicked Meta into a pile of debris. Meanwhile, Devon was coming to his senses inside the dim grocery. He found he was lying in a huge heap of bananas which had cushioned his impact. Bananas are good. That monster. It was Amy's daughter, Arihi, at one time. The young man was sure of it, but one look into its eyes told him all he needed to know. Arihi was already gone. Like the Gigantes, there seemed to be nothing left of the original spirit which inhabited that body. It was unclear who or what possessed it now, but one thing was certain. It had to be destroyed. His mind began trying to piece together a way to defeat such a creature. The EMP had killed all of the Gigantes' cardiac implants, but Echidna was still able to live and fly around. Maybe it had escaped the effects of the EMP due to the fact that it was the source. In that case, it would still be vulnerable to an electric shock. But how could one create a powerful shock with no electrical devices? Devon tried to stand up, but his foot crushed a banana on the floor, and he slipped cartoon-style backward into a display of lemons. Surrounded by the scent of citrus, an idea popped into his brain. Swiftly, he grabbed as many lemons as he could carry in his arms and ran next door to a hardware store. Once there, he dropped all the fruit on an abandoned counter and sprinted to and fro grabbing other items. Nails, copper wire, heavy rubber gloves, and a large metal spike all found their way to the counter next to the lemons. Man, I hope this works. Wearing the gloves, Devon adeptly used the nails and wire to make the lemons into bioelectrodes and connected them in serial. The accumulation of charge from 25 lemons should be enough to cause some damage. Carrying the string of produce, Devon ran from the store toward where he had heard the sounds of battle. I sure hope Meta's okay, if she's not. Nearing the monster, Devon did not see Meta anywhere. He watched as the creature wrapped its serpentine body around the water trough and began spewing toxic venom into the flow. Devon observed from behind an overturned vehicle. Damn! It's poisoning the water supply! That's just horrible! I can't believe Tartarus would stoop to... He was interrupted by a weak laughing sound from a few feet away. You idiot! A wounded Tartarus soldier derailed the young hero. That's not just poison. It's corrosive in high concentrations, yes. But that, my friend, is the mutagen. Devon grabbed the man by the collar and slammed him against the armored car. What are you talking about? You'd better spill it. The soldier laughed again. I have nothing to fear. I'm gonna die anyway. I'm just gonna tell you because it's fun. He took a deep breath, trying to suppress the pain. That poison that's spitting into the water there is the very formula that made it and the Gigantes what they are. What? When the people of the city come back to rebuild, which they will, everyone will consume some of the mutagen. Then Tartars will release their radiation to complete the process, just like on the monsters. Every human in Kalminga will become one of our monsters. There's nothing you can do now. Devon was silent for a moment. Poison would have been better. He unceremoniously dropped the man. Tartars seemed to enjoy hiring very talkative cronies. Well, I'll just have to take out that thing before it spews enough toxin. He found his way over to the base of the trough. It was supported by huge concrete pillars. After a brief search, Devon found a maintenance ladder leading up to the superior surface of the aqueduct. He climbed it as fast as he could. What are the chances this'll work? I mean, I'm just a powerless little human. What can I hope to do to that monster? And with what? Lemons? Still, I've got to try. David defeated Goliath with just a slingshot and a little stone. When he reached the top, Devon vaulted up onto the concrete ledge opposite the beast. It desisted spewing the mutagen into the water and shrieked at him. I don't know exactly what they did to you, Arihi, but you aren't in control anymore. I'm afraid I have to kill you. Echidna roared again and spit a large quantity of its venom at the defiant human. Devon put his arm in front of his face, and the toxin hit his upper half. His shirt began to melt off his body, but his skin's natural resistance to poison rendered the blast of no effect. He moved his hand down slowly and dramatically. Is that all you've got? In a swift moment, he ran to his left and jumped toward a barrier in the middle of the trough. Kicking off of it, Devon leapt to the same side of the aqueduct as Echidna and jabbed the metal spike connected to the lemon batteries into his foe. There was a long, pregnant moment where the world seemed to stand still. Echidna looked down at Devon and his makeshift electrical weapon at her midsection. An evil smile came to its face. Uh-oh. The monster then flew backward and threw the young man off. He landed with a roll to avoid injury, and immediately rolled again to avoid the claws stabbing into the ground. Well, it was a long shot. Lemons? Seriously? What was I thinking? He hid behind the armored vehicle again. Echidna's keen eyes followed him there, and it spat its venom at his cover. Between the highly corrosive nature of the fluid and the force with which it was launched, the overturned car did not provide a very good barrier. Devon ran to another tiny fortress, which Echidna also destroyed. Eventually, he was able to evade its sight behind some rubble from earlier in the battle. The creature surged up and down the street for him in frustration. This little weakling who had stood up to it must be punished. He would not get away. While regrouping under cover, Devon came across something of interest. Half buried under some destroyed sidewalk debris was the form of the Artemis rocket launcher. The EMP had rendered it useless, but he picked it up anyway. If only there was some way to power it, the tides of the battle could turn in his favor. Just then, he remembered his string of citrus, which he had carried with him since discovering that it would not affect Echidna. The current may not be high enough to cause an electric shock, but maybe the voltage is high enough to power the Artemis. Working quickly, Devon removed the outer coverings to expose the circuitry of the weapon. Okay, I just need to figure out where to connect the terminals. He traced the wires back to their origin within the mechanism until he came up with a hypothesis. Well, here it goes. Devon inserted the two ends of the lemon battery wires into the circuit and hoped for the best. After a moment, there was a warm-up noise, and several lights began to come on. Yes, I got it! Woo! Jubilant outcries are usually not a good idea when being stalked by a killer monster. Echidna's head snapped around to where the sound came from. Devon elected to relocate. The creature pursued him wherever he went, but Devon managed to stay just out of sight. As he moved from hiding place to hiding place, he kept his trump card trained on Echidna at all times, but his movements were so quick that he could not get a clear shot. I can't afford to miss. This is my only chance. I need to have the perfect shot. Finally, he ducked around the corner of an Apple store and pressed up against the wall. The boy forced his breathing to slow and tried to concentrate on calming his galloping heart. During this moment of peace, he realized he had lost track of Echidna. Uh-oh, where did it go? Devon carefully looked around, but all was clear and silent. Then, the corner of the building suddenly exploded from the force of a strike. Devon was sent sprawling into the street, not badly injured, but completely exposed. Echidna rose up over the small structure and thundered a terrifying roar. It had never lost sight of him, and stalked him to this hiding place as well, before smashing the cover from behind. The Artemis had been knocked from Devon's hands, leaving him completely defenseless. During that time, Meta had been attempting to recover enough to assist in the battle. She watched helplessly as the monster had hunted Devon around the destroyed city block. "If only I could use my fangs, then I could pierce her skin." Meta tried again to expose the hidden blades, but they would not respond. "It's like I've lost control over the muscles there." Then, when Echidna knocked Devon into the street, and it looked like there was no way out, she made up her mind. Her serpent blade was unsheathed. She held it out, pointed it at her own midsection, and thrust it into the side of her stomach. Gasping in pain, Meta pulled it from her flesh, covered in her toxic blood. It was then, when she saw her clothing was in rags from being exposed to her ichor, that her heart dropped with a sudden realization that it might corrode her sword. For some reason, the blade withstood the lethal chemical. Maybe the original forgers had unknowingly found a way to make a non-corrodable weapon, or perhaps the sword was destined to be hers. Meta painfully stood up, with one hand over her self-inflicted gash. "If I died to protect people, then I finally made myself worth something." Devon watched as the deadly beast raised a killing claw and prepared to end his life. In the last second, he saw Meta leap high into the air and crash into Echidna from behind. The force from the attack pushed the target into the wall of a nearby structure. Stunned, Devon realized that she had penetrated the monster's left shoulder with her sword and was pinning it to the building. "Devon, shoot it!" Meta would have shouted, could she speak. Breaking out of his stupor, he clambered to retrieve his weapon. It was found to still be active, as the lemon-powered battery was still in place. Devon aimed the Artemis at Echidna and prepared to fire. "Meta, get out of there! This thing will kill you both!" he yelled. Echidna thrashed and wriggled against the exterior of the building, under Meta's sword. "If I let it go, it'll escape. You only have one shot." "Meta, move!" "I can't, just fire." "I won't shoot if you don't get out of there!" Echidna made an increased effort and nearly broke free. "Devon, you have to. Just do it. Don't worry about me." Hot tears were coming to Devon's eyes. I can't kill you." Meta calmly looked up. Her eyes met Devon's. "Shoot the damn gun." Devon nodded passionately. Okay. I'm sorry," he cried softly and squeezed the trigger. There was a shrill squeal that lasted about 1 second, and the projectile took off. It made a direct path toward its target and detonated. When Meta had taken her concentration from pinning the Echidna to the wall, it was able to push off and throw the small parasite aside. However, it was too late to escape the devastating explosion. Echidna was rocked by the blast and fell motionless to the ground, blackened and bleeding. As smoke rose from the creature's body, the Artemis fell from Devon's hands, and he slowly dropped to his knees. "If life gives you lemons," he weakly chuckled in denial of what had just happened. Devon kneeled there for what seemed like forever. He could not comprehend what to do next. The audacity of what Tartarus had done to a human being was enough in itself to break one's resolve, but what it led to was beyond his grasp. Now he had lost Meta, the only one he had. The wind had totally gone from his sails. Just then, Echidna began to move. The indirect blast had mortally wounded it, but it was not enough to completely kill. The furious creature slowly dragged itself over to Devon. With extreme effort fueled by hatred, it raised up on its snake body above him and lifted all 4 bladed arms to end it all. Devon could not force his body to move. The physical and emotional damage done to him through the course of the day crushed any chance he had to evade. He had nothing left. The last moment before it struck, a form flew through the air behind the creature. With a fearsome slash, the monster was beheaded suddenly and swiftly. Echidna's decapitated body fell at Devon's knees, and the head landed several feet away. The young man was dazed and confused, barely piecing together what had just happened. He looked to his right and saw Meta standing, katana in hand, looking more dead than alive. She gazed at the mutilated corpse of Echidna with a blank, unreadable expression on her face. Before she could do anything else, she found herself in Devon's gripping embrace. "Meta! Meta! I thought I'd lost you!" Pent-up tears from all the extreme emotions of the battle flowed unrestricted. Fear, joy, loss, sorrow, pain. Everything all ran together like a smear of paint in the hands of a master artist. In this moment, tragedy and love were blurred by the tears into something beautiful. Meta's eyes also filled with burning water. Her sword slipped from her hand and clattered to the ground. She had no idea how to hug back, so just stood with her arms pinned to her side. The pair stood unmoving for a long time. Devon just wanted to hold her, comfort her, tell her everything would be all right. But now was not the time. AEGIS Wars, Chapter 42. Following the climactic battle, Devon and Meta began to set out for home. There were no vehicles left functional after the EMP, so walking was the only option. Both were extraordinarily tired and wounded, but the prospect of being home was too appealing to ignore. Neither one knew how to start a conversation. There was nothing left to say about what had happened. Therefore, the several hours that it took to travel 5 miles passed in complete silence. Somehow, the two dragged themselves to Amy's house and entered the front door. There was no physical barrier strong enough to impede Devon's progress. The needs of his body seemed to force any auxiliary concerns he had to the back of his mind. He made his unwavering path to the living room couch and collapsed headfirst. It felt as though the universe was having a rock concert in his head until he touched down on that piece of heavenly furniture. The world suddenly seemed to stop spinning. Devon let out an audible sigh of happiness, and then everything went black. A dark aura filled the command room in Tartarus headquarters. Many of the fearsome generals and scientists, who were normally bolstered by a powerful air, were sweating in their seats. No man was brave enough to utter a word in the presence of Nordis. He sat at the head of the table, stooped over, with his lips pressed against folded hands. A palpable darkness seemed to exude from the tyrannical maniac. It was as though a dozen evil demons were stewing inside of him, and all who were within the room could feel their terror. Finally, he spoke. "He will die." Again, silence. There did not seem to be any sense in adding to this proclamation. "That boy has not only somehow destroyed the Nemean lion and numerous gigantes, but he destroyed the Typhon and killed Echidna. These setbacks can no longer be ignored."
"Sir, don't worry," a man spoke up. "Nothing can stop our ultimate power. These minor bruises mean nothing to—"
He was silenced by a fatal glare from the commander. The man swallowed and did not speak again. "Although nothing can prevent us from achieving our goals, this tiny nuisance can cause us to be disrespected. A boy who spits in the face of a god must be punished." Nordis continued, his overwhelming anger instilling fear in all who surrounded him. "I will destroy everything he knows, kill everyone he loves, and decimate this world. And it will all be his fault. I will leave him powerlessly, begging for death, and then I will give it to him. Slowly. It's time to release the Hydra." The complete silence that followed his statement belied the feeling that everyone in the room had. No one was willing to remind him why the Hydra was locked in the deepest, highest security level in all of Tartarus. "If anyone has any objections, let them speak now or forever hold their peace," the commander said sarcastically. If there was a single sound, it had been swallowed into nothingness by the dark void. "Wonderful. I'm glad we had this productive meeting." Devon awoke feeling refreshed. Somehow, all of the day's tension and pain seemed to be gone. "Wow, I actually feel pretty good." He stood up from the couch and stretched his arms. He was not wearing a shirt, due to it having been dissolved off his body during the battle with Echidna. "I wonder how long I slept," he mumbled, scratching his bare back. "About 18 hours, Amy's voice responded.
Devon turned quickly to see his foster mother standing in the portal to the kitchen, leaning on one post. "Oh, good morning, Amy." Then he recalled the circumstances of when she had last seen him. "I am so sorry about yesterday. I wanted to tell you where we were going, but it was too late. I had to fight this monster attacking—" "Yeah, I know. I saw it on the news, until the feed cut out. I figured you had something to do with it, but I had no idea if you were dead or alive." "I'm sorry. I just had to fight. You always have to fight. You're always in a hurry to dangerous situations. If you keep that up, someday you're not going to make it back, and you're going to leave someone behind." Devon moved over to her and put an arm around her shoulder. "I won't die and leave you. You've already lost one family, and I won't let you lose another." "I don't mean me." The young man's heart dropped. He released her and stepped back. "Oh, Meta, where is she?" Amy shook her head. "I haven't seen her. I tried to wake you a bunch of times while you were sleeping, but I couldn't get you to budge." Devon was suddenly aware that his hair was wet. "Did I sleep through you dumping water?" The woman nodded. "I think I know where Meta is, thank you." Devon ran up the stairs to the attic. On his way through, he grabbed the smallest t-shirt from a box marked Ilhala that he could find, pulled it over his head, and exited onto the porch. From there, he climbed up onto the roof where he saw Meta. She was squatting on the peak of the edifice, looking down at her feet. Devon sat down on the roof next to her, his legs dangling over the edge of the house. They both sat quietly for a minute. "Have you been up here all night?" he ventured. She nodded. "Are you doing okay?" She shook her head. "I killed my own mother. I know there was no way we could have saved her. Why is this world so messed up? The most messed up part is that something like me exists. I wish I could just die, and maybe things would have been better." Devon had no idea what to say to make her feel better, being that he was no psychologist or counselor. He could not help but notice several bladeless handles of kitchen knives sitting next to the grill. After a period where neither of them spoke, he stood up. "Hey, I've got an idea. Come with me." He dropped to the second-story porch and entered the attic. Meta reluctantly followed. The girl was still dressed in the ragged clothes from the previous day, so Devon grabbed a random t-shirt from a box marked Arihi and tossed it to her. "Here, we can't have you looking like you went through a paper shredder." The girl began apathetically taking off her tattered shirt to put on the new clothing. She did not have an inkling that such an action might be slightly awkward. To avoid vandalizing her with his eyes, Devon dove headfirst into another box full of clothes. His blood ran hot, reddening his cheeks to display his embarrassment. "What am I worrying about?" he wondered. "She really thinks just like a child. There isn't anything wrong. Despite everything she's been through, she's still innocent at heart. No need to feel awkward." After a little while, he emerged from the box, holding another cloth item. Here are some pants, too." Meta nodded and began removing her old pants as well. This prompted Devon to dive back into the box. After the sound of her rustling had finished, the young man pulled himself back out of the clothes and laid his eyes on his fashion masterpiece. He had inadvertently dressed her in a simple gray shirt with the word love scrawled in cursive black print over the left breast and black capris. She did not look half bad. However, Meta's face clearly showed her depression. In an attempt to cheer her up, Devon gave her a goofy smile and thumbs up. The corners of her mouth raised slightly. If there was anyone who could save her from despair, it was Devon. The two then descended the stairs and walked outside. Upon reaching the driveway, the young man stopped. 1 second. He dashed back into the house and found Amy. "Amy, we're going out for a few minutes." The woman was slightly startled. Noticing her concern, Devon added, "Don't worry, we're just heading to the park for a little while. Be back in just a bit." Amy relaxed. "Okay, have fun. I'll have homemade gyros waiting for you when you get back." Devon smiled. "Thanks for everything, Amy. I don't know where we'd be without you." He ran back outside and joined Meta. "All right, follow me." The boy led them to Garrison Park. Without dallying anywhere else, they walked into the wooden trails. The beautiful late-morning sunlight shone through the leaves of the trees, creating a dappled pattern on the path below. It resembled a chiaroscuro painting, with patches of light and dark all over both the walkway and the undergrowth. As they strolled silently together, Meta began to visibly lighten. She looked around with wonder at the glory of nature surrounding them. The air was still, until a light breeze blew through the trail. Meta closed her eyes and savored the cool air movement against her skin. She smiled as her mind formed more positive thoughts. Well, maybe there are good things in the world. As they walked along, a pair of female joggers approached them from the opposite direction. Devon and Meta smiled and waved, but the joggers moved as far as possible to the far side of the path and only stared. As they disappeared down the trail, the sound of their words reached the ears of the shunned.
Did you see those tattoos? She's no good. Probably on drugs, too. Maybe she has AIDS. Why is she even out here, making us look at her? She's ruining the beauty of the park.
Meta's spirits fell. Devon could see her slip back into her depression as her head dipped and her feet shuffled. Don't listen to those jerks. They don't know anything, Devon consoled. He tentatively reached his arm around her shoulder, but stopped just before touching her. Instead, he stood in front of the girl to prevent her from walking and looked directly into her eyes. I don't care about your markings. I can see right through them and see your heart. You didn't choose to have them, and even if you did, who cares? Devon stood up to his full height, and Meta continued looking into his face. Plus, I never thought I'd say this, but I actually like them. They're part of who you are, and I like everything about who you are. The words had the desired effect, and Meta looked positive again. Do you really mean that? Devon scratched his head somewhat self-consciously. What I'm saying is, you are more than anything you've done. You're something awesome, and I wouldn't change a thing. She smiled, and the two continued along the path. Meta had a bit of a skip in her step. After a quarter-mile following the path, it neared a bend in the river. The trail ahead veered left, away from the water. Instead of following it, Devon had another idea. Hey, let's walk by the river. We won't bump into any more idiot joggers down there. Meta nodded, and they departed the beaten path in exchange for the water's edge. The pair hopped along flat stones, thoroughly enjoying their decision. Now, careful, Meta, Devon cautioned. Some of these can be a little slippery! The rock he was standing on suddenly slipped from underneath him, and the boy tumbled into the water. Meta had a strange expression on her face that appeared totally unfamiliar to him as she observed his predicament in the water. It looked like she might cry, but her eyes did not look sad at all. Devon sat in the shallow water for a moment and tried to figure out what her reaction meant. She climbed up onto another of the flat rocks and pretended to slip, landing into the water next to him with a splash. Meta, are you all right? He asked, very concerned at this behavior. She was making a very strange noise that he had never heard from her before, almost like crying or gurgling. Then it came to him. She was laughing. Ha! That was awesome! Devon's concern turned into wonder. Yeah, I'm pretty clumsy, huh? She could not stop laughing, despite her confusion. What the heck is going on with me? Devon smiled and stood up. Well, enough making fun of me. Let's... Wait, what's that? Upon standing, Devon noticed something on the underside of the rock he had overturned in his fall. There was a tiny black amphibian clinging to the damp surface. Hey, Meta, come take a look at this. She came at his beckoning and examined the creature. What is it? I think it's a salamander. Isn't it amazing? Yeah. She reached a finger to touch it, then pulled back. I shouldn't touch it. It's okay, Devon reassured. You can even hold it. He picked up the little salamander and placed it into Meta's awaiting hands. She was internally bubbling with excitement, but tried to contain it. The little amphibian sat still for a second before scrambling out of her grasp and plummeting downward. Oop, Meta! Devon's hands went to the top of his head, but the girl's lightning reflexes allowed her to catch the slimy skydiver and set it down gently. Nice catch. He then began overturning more stones in search of other life. They found several more salamanders and had a great time holding them and comparing sizes and colors. Now we have to be careful, because sometimes spiders can hide under these things. With that, the next rock he overturned had an enormous wolf spider on the other side. He screeched in surprise, and, losing his footing, fell backward into the water. The spider went flying through the air and landed on Meta's hand. She looked calmly at the arachnid on her body. Why are you afraid of this little thing? It's no scarier than the salamanders. The pint-sized predator crawled up her arm, then down her torso and leg to the ground. Devon and Meta spent hours in the park, exploring, finding wildlife, and just generally enjoying each other's company. It was nearly afternoon when they decided to head back. On the return journey, the two laughed back and forth, genuinely feeling good about the world. Devon paused. You know, I really like your laugh. The world seems brighter when you're happy. Meta smiled at him. Well, thank you. Approaching the house, they walked past the old country squire parked in the driveway and continued into the front room. Amy, we're home, Devon called. Do you need any help with the gyros? There was no response. The lights were on, but Amy was nowhere to be seen. Devon tried again. Amy, where are you? Maybe she went to the store. Devon's heart flipped, as it suddenly occurred to him that the station wagon should not be outside their house right now. It had been left just outside of Tartarus' hangar. His brain frantically considered the possible implications of this as he hurried into the kitchen. Still no Amy. The young man quickly went around the table to check the rest of the house, only to find his surrogate mother face up on the floor in a pool of her own blood.
Aegis Wars, Chapter 43. Amy, are you alive? Oh God! Devon kneeled beside her and held a hand to the side of her face. Her own hand slowly moved to his cheek. Devon, she groaned feebly. Devon, where's Meta? She's right here with me. She's fine. What happened? I'm going to die. No, you're not. You're going to be just fine. I just need to find where the bleeding's coming from. I'm not going to be fine, she choked. I finally had a family again, and now I'm going to be leaving. I'll never see you, or Meta, or Arihi if she's alive, ever again. Devon paused for a second. What could someone say in a situation like this? Amy spoke once more, even weaker this time. Everything is dark. I'm afraid to die. The only thing keeping her from crying was her body was too far gone to allow it. Her throat was choked with an inexpressible fear. I'm afraid. What happens next? Devon slapped his other hand to her face and held her head still, looking straight into her eyes. He had failed to truly share the hope of eternal life with Autolycus, and he was not certain if Kugyo accepted it or not. But there was no way he would let this woman he viewed as his own mother slip into darkness. Listen to me. I know what happens. You could go to a perfect place and be with the one who created you and knows you better than anyone else does forever. All you have to do is believe. What? I don't understand. Listen. Arihi is gone now, and I know for a fact that's where she is. Devon thought about all the Christian clothes and material found in Arihi's possessions. He knew. You can go see her again if you believe exactly what she believed. Arihi? What did she believe? I'm getting through to her. Oh, Jesus, help me now. She believed that if you accept that the creator of the universe sent his son to die for your sins, then you would have eternal life. Amy did not say anything. That's what I believe too. I know it's true. Amy's tears suddenly came as she shook her head violently. I believe. Everything you say is true. I know it. That's great, Devon whispered. I'll see you, Arihi, someday. I'm sure. Save a place for me, okay? Amy cried and laughed at the same time as her spirit faded from this world, leaving only her motionless body behind. Devon slowly stood up. Despite the circumstances, he could not keep from smiling. It felt as though a weight had been lifted from his chest. The path for her soul had been paved to glory, and she was finally reunited with her daughter. There is nothing in the world like that feeling. Then, the gravity of her death began to set in, and his countenance darkened. Tartarus did this. There is no other explanation. Meta walked up beside him, but Devon stopped her. You don't need to see this, Meta. He found an unused tablecloth and lay it over Amy's body. That'll have to do for now. The enemy must have done this to strike back at him, but how did they do it? And when would the assailants strike next? Devon pondered this as he walked into the living room. Standing in the darkened room, unobtrusively, was a fearsome metal android. Devon's reflexes quickly caused him to take a defensive stance. The machine made no pretense of being human. It stood a bit over 6 feet tall, with several instances of exposed circuitry. Other areas of its body were covered with metal plates, and it had dual curved metal blades on each arm, one of which had a coating of blood. The young man glared at it. "You," he breathed venomously. "You murdered my mother. I'm going to dismantle you, piece by piece." The android opened its mouth, revealing a set of deadly, sharp metal teeth. No sound came out, but it appeared to be baring its teeth menacingly. "That's it, you Terminator. You're dead." Devon charged forward and shoved the robot back. It attempted to recover balance while slashing with its bladed arm. The boy dodged easily, grabbed his pistol from next to the couch, and pointed it at the enemy. He scowled at it for an instant before firing 3 shots into his chest. The force from the bullets caused the right arm to break off. The machine bared its teeth again and smashed through a window to get outside. Devon pursued it through the broken gap. He then confronted the damaged assassin in the front yard. Before he could continue the attack, the mechanical monstrosity opened its mouth again, and a familiar voice came out. It was the voice of Hammond Ordis.
"Hello, Persich."
Devon clenched his fists.
"How's everything? How's your mom?"
"You bastard!" Devon cried and aimed his gun at the robot's head.
"Now, don't talk to me like that. We aren't enemies, you know. I think of you as a sort of, unconventional friend."
Nordis explained.
"You helped me define the flaws in my plans, and for that I'm grateful. However, you kind of overstepped your boundaries by destroying Typhon and Echidna. You took away my most important things, and I'm just returning the favor."
"I'm not gonna let you get away with this, you monster." Devon prepared to shoot the robot when an exact replica of the android stepped through the hole in the side of the house. "What the?" A laughing sound emanated from the robot.
"Amazing, isn't it? Now you see the power of the Hydra. Cut one down, and 2 more rise in its place."
"How is that possible?"
The Hydra is one of the deadliest creations to ever come from the depths of Tartarus. It was designed by a collaboration between our genetics and robotic department 5 years ago. They managed to create a mechanical imitation of living cells, using our genetic template as the base DNA. By doing so, it was imbued with as close to life as anything made of metal could ever be.
Nordis' voice intensified.
The most incredible part, any part of its body detached can replicate the original form with a type of mechanical cell division. As long as it can obtain proper construction materials, specifically metal, it will continue to grow copies of itself. However, the weak-minded idiots I'm forced to work with feared it. Maybe it had something to do with the fact that they once lost control of it, and it rampaged through headquarters and killed over 20 people. So it was deactivated and locked in our deepest archives. I thought it seemed like just the thing to reward you for defying me.
"How did you find me?" Devon questioned, fearing he had made a grave mistake.
How could I not? I saw your battle against the Gigantes in the news, so I knew that you were in Ortontown at one time. When you left your means of transportation outside our hangar, the trip meter had exactly the correct number of miles to have come from this very spot. That meant you were still operating out of little old Ortontown. I just had the Hydra drive that piece of junk right up to your front door and get to work.
Devon growled with fury and prepared to attack the twin robots. "Maniac! How dare he talk about murdering Amy like that?"
Have fun, Persich. I will definitely enjoy seeing your life and everything you care about torn apart.
Devon had enough of Nordis' mocking voice. He sprinted toward the one-armed first droid with intentions of ripping it open. "I just need to figure out how to defeat these things without allowing them to split. If I can find some kind of control, maybe I can shut it down without it being able to grow back." When he approached, it swung its lethal claws at him. Devon barely dodged, but it put him off balance to counterattack. The robot plowed him into the ground with its shoulder and trapped him underneath its weight. Devon wrestled out from underneath, holding on to its remaining arm to avoid getting slashed to death. He attempted to pry open some kind of control panel, but the mechanical strength slowly overpowered his grip on the bladed arm. Just before the sharp weapons reached him, he gave up trying to find a weakness and fired his gun through the bottom of its head. The bullet came out the top, and the robot stumbled backward away from him. Devon watched as it made several halting steps back and rested its remaining hand on the large conjoined mailboxes at the end of the driveway. There was a tense moment when nothing happened. Then, something began to move. The metallic post collector began to be absorbed into the android. There was almost no sound as the procedure took place. Only a slight flowing or clanking noise could be heard. Devon's eyes widened and mouth dropped open as the bullet hole he had made visibly closed up and the missing arm began to grow back. Oh my God. The renewed robot rushed at him, teeth and blades gleaming. Devon backpedaled away, both knocked down by the other Hydra form. They stood over him for a moment, lethal red eyes boring into his skull. The two raised their weaponized arms and thrust them down. At the last second, a Japanese sword thrust in and stopped the killing stroke. Meta had arrived and blocked the razors only inches from the boy's body. She performed a backflip kick to make some space and knock one of the droids backward. The second reacted quickly and attempted a round slash to her middle. The girl turned her katana over to block the attack and stepped forward with an incapacitating downward cut to its exposed left side. Devon popped to his feet. Nice timing. Thanks a lot. He took a moment to examine their opponents. The Hydra that Meta had just cut did not have any access to metal, so instead of replicating, the two disconjoined parts grew back together as though it had never been damaged. This is gonna be bad, he predicted. We need to get as many people out of here as possible. Without taking her eyes off the enemy, she pushed him with her left hand. Go. Try to evacuate innocent people. I'll hold them off. Devon nodded, understanding what she meant. I'll be back to help you as soon as I can, I promise. With that, he sprinted toward the center of town, having second thoughts about his decision. I never should have left her, but I think she stands a much better chance of fighting them alone than I ever would. One of the Hydra wasted no time in diving after the fleeing young man, but Meta intercepted it with a half-moon kick, knocking it to the ground. The second machine came at her, blazed raged in the air. She stepped toward it, blocked the attack with her forearm at its forearm, and impaled it on her sword. The little fighter then ran forward, pushing along until she tossed it to the ground. The other robot attacked from behind, but Meta anticipated it. She dodged from the side and did a spin move with a horizontal strike. The force from her sword bisected the unit and sent several body parts flying into Jacob Henry's bright red Corvette parked in his driveway with a crash. Meta took a ready position, prepared for the next attack. Then, rising up from the wreckage of the extravagant automobile stood not one, nor two, but 3 Hydra robots. Each part that had been separated from the first body had found enough metal within the car to generate a new body. The girl tightened the grip on her sword. This is not going to be fun. Meanwhile, Devon reached the town hall. Out of breath, he burst into the building. I need to see the mayor, he gasped. The mayor's secretary gave him a look through narrow eyes. And you are? That doesn't matter. The town's under attack, and we need to evacuate citizens as soon as possible. The woman showed no interest at all. Really? Well, Mr. Concerned Citizen, I can make you an appointment to meet him next Tuesday. Devon looked thoughtful for a moment. How about I make an appointment for 10 seconds from now? He then sprinted toward the mayor's office. With a jumping front kick, he knocked the door to the floor. The mayor was on the phone and did not react at all to the intruder's violent entrance. Mr. Mayor, I have an order of business. The balding man raised his hand for silence. Frustrated, Devon walked up to the desk and pushed the end call button on the receiver. Sir, people will die if you don't listen to me. The mayor slowly stood up. His considerably overweight frame pushed a light gray suit to its limits. He wore large bifocals, and only a few wisps connected what steely hair was left on his temples. His wrinkled face was clean-shaven, but noticeable jowl lines displayed his age. Young man, he thundered, just who do you think you are? I have... Devon noticed the name card on his desk. Nicholas Bowman. Mr. Bowman, my name is Devon Persich. I'm nobody important, but there's a war going... It was Mayor Bowman's turn to interrupt this time. Devon Persich, the one who made that horrible mess against the giants and did the same against the monster in Kamingo? He gripped Devon's hand with 2 mighty paws and shook it up and down like he was pumping an old water handle. Pleasure to meet you, my boy. I'm mighty pleased with all you've done. You're a regular hero, you know that? Mayor Bowman commended him enthusiastically. Thank you, sir, Devon faltered, taken aback. But there's something really important. I wish that more people would be like you, always fighting for the greater good, fighting for the little guy, fighting the forces of evil. That's what I like in a man, son. Thanks, but that's how I do things. We're cut from the same cloth, you and me. That's my campaign slogan. Fighting for the greater good. Fighting for Mr. Bowman! There's a war going on out there. People are going to get killed, and my friend is out there, holding them all off. Well, I'm in here getting patted on the back by a fat, babbling imbecile of a mayor. As if to accent his outburst, the sound of a muffled explosion came from outside. Sorry, Devon apologized, looking at the floor. It's just, say no more. The big man lumbered over to the left side of his office, where there was a microphone set up. He pressed a button and spoke into it. Friends, neighbors, fellow citizens of these United States of America, lend me your ears. Mayor Bowman's voice thundered across the town through the public address system, and he savored every moment that he could take to be dramatic. It has come to my attention that the presence of an unwelcome violence has been... Devon grabbed the microphone away from the histrionic man and issued his own message. Everyone, get the hell out of the town if you don't want to die. He slammed the microphone back where it belonged and took off running out the door. Yelling over his shoulder, he paid his respects to the mayor. It was a pleasure to meet you, sir. The big man was left standing in his office in bewilderment, groping for grandiose words to say in parting. Devon was already gone. Aegis Wars, Chapter 44. Please be okay, Meta. Please be okay. Devon pleaded into the air. The boy sprinted through the town as fast as he could go. The sounds of battle were no longer coming from in front of their house, so he ran to where he heard the commotion taking place just down the street. The scene that he observed was as bad as he feared. Meta was surrounded by over a dozen Hydra units. They had intentionally forced the battle toward the main street, where there were more cars and a lot more metal. They would attack her from different sides, sometimes multiple at once. The fact that she was somehow able to defend herself testified of her immense fighting skills. Her body displayed only a few abrasions, and the defensive maneuvers that she possessed allowed her to stay alive, continuing to block the onslaught of attacks with her sword. Devon knew it was only a matter of time before their sheer numbers overwhelmed her and tore her to pieces. He desperately wanted to help, but what good could he possibly do? He was definitely no match for even one or two of those mechanical monsters. Just then, he got an idea. Pushing through the throngs of fleeing townspeople, he made his way back to the house. Meta coolly blocked each incoming strike from the robot's deadly claws. She kept moving to prevent them from totally enveloping her. The girl knew that any detached part of their body could form an additional enemy, but sometimes the only way to keep from getting killed was to take off an arm or cut the attacker in half. Although her skill with the katana allowed her to stay alive this far, she had received some wounds and knew that she could not keep it up for too much longer. Still, she would fight as long as she had to. This was her part. Just then, the country squire flew in and smashed through a mob of Hydra to Meta's posterior. She instantly did a backflip and landed on the roof of the car. Devon put it into reverse and simultaneously hit the gas and triggers for hidden guns. With a squeal of tires and a chatter of automatic weapon fire, they pulled back about 50 feet from the group of enemy robots. The Hydra regathered themselves into a formation and stood motionless for a long while. Not certain what they were doing, Devon exited the vehicle, and Meta jumped down beside him. Then Norda's laughing voice once again came from the mouth of the Hydra. Each unit emitted his words, giving it the chilling timbre of a myriad of sounds.
Thank you, Devon. I knew I could count on you.
What are you talking about? Devon growled.
Why, for helping me create my army, of course.
Nordas laughed again.
But here's the best part. Every time the creature splits, it takes a fraction of its power core with it. Now I can spread these robots across the country, in every major city. Then I just remotely detonate the core, and bam! A simultaneous terrorist attack in all major urban centers. Oh, when it divides, the core won't have the destructive capabilities as it would altogether, but the blast will still be powerful enough to destroy separate blocks.
While the madman was boasting, Devon discreetly handed Meta an open book, which he had grabbed while fetching his battle car. It was the Greek mythology tome, open to the page featuring Hydra. There was a picture of the Greek hero Heracles doing battle with it. Each time he cut off a head, he used a flaming torch to cauterize the wound and prevent two more from growing back in its place. Nordis continued his raving proclamation.
After I kill you, I'll unleash the Hydra across the nation, and I will hold the quivering remains of this country in my iron fist.
You know what we have to do? Devon whispered to Meta. She nodded. We'll give it a shot. He climbed back into the car, and Meta slowly drew her katana. As Nordis resumed his insane laughter, Devon hit the gas and charged toward the automated army. Meta ran ahead of him. She sliced the front Hydra in half right before Devon twisted the steering wheel and activated the rear-facing flamethrower. The wagon spun in a 360-degree turn, causing fire to enswath the bisected target. The mechanical cells on the edges of the wound melted together. The Hydra unit faltered and jolted until the two pieces lay still. The repair systems were no longer able to function. One down, 37, 38, 39, a whole lot more to go.
What are you doing?
Demanded Nordis.
That'll never work.
We'll see about that. The Hydra paused for a moment, analyzing what had just happened. They then bared their teeth and made a synthetic roaring sound.
Exterminate.
Meta assumed a fighting pose, while Devon revved the engine of the country squire. The two opposing sides charged toward each other, commencing a climactic battle which would tear the small town apart. The clash raged on for several hours, the robots attempting to kill the last remaining resistance, while the heroes coordinated their attacks to damage their enemies before melting the healing cells. Devon had to exchange the fuel source for his flamethrower to keep the fire coming. The extended fight gave almost all the citizens of Ortontown the chance to escape. In the course of the battle, the automatons broke all the remaining glass on the car and ripped off one wheel. Unable to drive any longer, Devon removed his homemade flamethrower from the trunk of the wagon and continued the fight on foot. After a long struggle, every single Hydra lay dead on the city street. The heroes breathed heavily, exhausted, but still scanning the area for any active droids. Devon finally let down his guard and dropped the flamethrower to the ground. A dark expression came to his face. Nordis will pay for this, he breathed venomously. Just then, a voice came from a severed head of a Hydra.
Goodbye, Persich.
With that, all the scattered pieces of machinery began to glow with the now familiar bluish energy. Oh shoot, they're gonna blow. Using equipment he had kept in the back of the vehicle, Devon made a NASCAR-worthy tire change, leapt into the driver's seat, and pushed the car as fast as it would go out of the town. Meta jumped into the passenger side and held on as they tried to put as much distance as possible between the impending blast and their automobile as possible. The girl looked into the back seat, then pulled on Devon's arm. Devon, you might want to take a look in the back. He turned, and immediately his heart dropped in terror. There was a deactivated top half of a Hydra in the back seat. It must have been thrown there during the skirmish. The body was glowing with energy, about to remotely detonate. Crap! Devon reached his right arm back to attempt to throw the bomb out of their car. As soon as he made contact, however, the light began to fade. Puzzled, he released his grip. The Hydra started glowing again. Once more he grabbed the machine, and the glow turned off. Devon could not devote any brain power to contemplate the meaning of this at the moment. He just leaned back to hold on to the delaying bomb in the rear of the car, and put all of his concentration toward getting as far away from the incoming explosion as possible. Around a minute after beginning their escape, the city was enveloped in a burst of energy. Every structure within half a mile of Ortontown was disintegrated. The northbound station wagon barely made it clear of the explosion, but the passengers lived to fight another day. AEGIS Wars, Chapter 45. On the drive toward the Mojave Desert, there was no conversation. Devon steamed with anger against Nordis and all of Tartarus. How dare he murder Amy? She never did anything to deserve that. And who knows how many people died in our fight against the Hydra. They cannot be allowed to continue this terror. This ends now. They headed north toward where they found the genetics lab and the hangar. Devon turned left and drove west through an open desert. Nothing but sand was anywhere to be seen. He kept driving. I won't rest until we find their headquarters. They've got to be around here somewhere. After some time driving, Devon saw movement ahead in the sand. It appeared to be some kind of enormous mole tunnel being dug, coming right at them. He twisted the wheel to avoid collision with the burrowing object. When he did, a huge mechanical form leapt out of the sand and flew through the air like a dolphin before burrowing back into the ground. "What the heck?" Devon yelled in bafflement. He continued driving to get away, but the weary and war-torn automobile could not go as fast as it once could, and the telltale mound of sand quickly caught up to them. At the last second, the driver spun the steering wheel around, sending the country squire into a sliding donut. Up to this point, he had kept his hand on the chunk of the hydra in the back seat, but upon performing the sharp movement, it slipped from his grasp and began glowing again. Devon quickly replaced his hand, but looked out in front of their vehicle to survey their attacker. Again, the giant robotic boring device careened through the air, but this time it landed on the surface of the sand. The monstrous metal beast began to transform before their eyes. The three rotating parts at the front of the machine slowed to a stop, revealing they were, in fact, fashioned after large canine heads. 2 pairs of legs folded from their place tucked up against the body, and a tail coiled out from the hind end. It stood about 10 feet tall at the shoulder, and appeared to be a huge, 3-headed dog. Cerberus, guardian of the underworld. At least this meant they were probably going in the right direction. Following the spin maneuver, the station wagon was directed right at Cerberus' face. The monster roared at them and began to charge. Devon shifted into reverse and backed up as fast as possible while holding the triggers to fire the hidden machine guns. The bullets bounced harmlessly off the robot, but he continued to fire until there was nothing left. At this, the guardian closed in with its 3 snapping heads. At the last moment, the driver whipped the wheel left, and it sharply veered from its course, barely dodging the lunge of the beast. As Cerberus flew by, it activated hidden weapons of its own. Heavy Gatling gunfire spewed from portals on its side and tore into the country square. Devon floored the accelerator and moved as fast as it would go to get out of range. He drove in a large, looping circle to keep the strongest part of the armor facing the enemy for as long as possible. "That's it. I'm not letting this thing stop me. I'm killing it." Devon completed the circle and made an arrow-like path toward the Cerberus. When they were about 150 feet apart, he removed his hand from the piece of the hydra. The station wagon picked up velocity, as did the giant guard dog. They both rushed toward one another at maximum speed. When only 30 feet from the target, Devon cried out, "Meta, jump!" He dove out the door himself, rolling in the sand. The girl did the same, and the vehicle continued on its ballistic trajectory. Cerberus sank the teeth from all 3 of its heads into the car, just as the destabilizing robot in the back seat detonated. The momentum of the automobile, coupled with the self-destruction of the Hydra's power core, caused a warhead-like pattern of destruction. The explosion demolished the Cerberus, and pieces of it rained down like ashes from a campfire. A fan-like area of sand had been blown away by the blast, which stretched out for over 300 feet. Revealed beneath the previously sandy ground was a metallic surface. "Is that Tartarus headquarters?" Devon wondered. That could be some kind of bunker surface, meant to withstand a nuclear attack. No wonder it wasn't damaged by that blast. They examined the exposed surface more closely, looking for some kind of entryway. Their search was fruitful. After a short scrutiny, a door was found that led into the depths of the bunker. Devon led the way, feeling along the dark walls to guide his steps down the staircase. As the two continued into the blackness, he could not help but compare their descent to a trip to the underworld, the Tartarus of legends. After an unknown distance into the earth, Devon's outstretched hand came across a heavy door. He turned his head to look back from where they came. The open portal at the top of the stairs appeared as a minuscule spot of light in a sea of darkness. Blindly, the boy felt around the obstacle until his hand came across a latch. With a bit of effort, he forced it open and pushed the massive door out of the way. The room on the other side of the door was also very dark. Devon and Meta crept into the base, wary for any dangers. Meta closed her eyes and detected a large number of heat signatures approaching them. "Whoa, Devon, we've got company." She opened her eyes and tugged on his arm. Suddenly, the area was flooded with extremely bright light. The dark, accustomed eyes of the intruders were overwhelmed by the onslaught of photons, and they recoiled away from the brightness. There were sounds of running feet, but Devon was unable to see anything to resist. After a few minutes, he could open his eyes again, and found his companion and himself surrounded by Tartarus soldiers, with weapons trained on them. "Hey, guys, do you think we could borrow a cup of sugar?" he asked. The guns ignited with electric pulses. The two encircled heroes could not fight back against the shocks and were driven to unconsciousness. Aegis Wars, Chapter 46. After an unknown amount of time, Meta woke up. Once again, they were in pitch blackness. The inky blackness was so pervasive that it was impossible to tell if one's eyes were open or closed. Meta used her thermal detection abilities to search for heat sources. She saw Devon lying on the ground in front of her, but there was nothing else around. Where are we? The girl wondered. Even her sensitive eyes could detect nothing. She groped around the extremities of the room to find they were imprisoned in a small 6-foot by 6-foot area. There was not even a discoverable door or opening of any sort. She sat down in the darkness beside Devon and waited. A little while later, he stirred. Where are we? He groaned. Meta, are you there? She set her hand on his head in response. Yep, I'm with you. I guess we got captured and they threw us in here. Man, it's dark. Indeed, we're alone in this tiny room. Devon felt around the prison himself and reached the same conclusion. It looks like this is some kind of containment unit, and I can't find any way out. He sat down blindly, accidentally putting his weight on Meta. Yikes! Sorry! He hopped off and then sat next to her. I wonder how long they'll keep us here. For all he knew, Tartars would conquer the world and leave the two of them in the tiny box to rot. There was very little to talk about, so they both remained with their own thoughts. Devon wondered if Meta was afraid of what would happen next. He continued to think back on her behavior, trying to find something that would guarantee her humanity. He also thought of Amy and all the people that Tartars had killed. This brought renewed feelings of anger. They would pay for everything they've done. Meta's thoughts were of a quite different nature. She considered Devon. Why did he care about her when she had done so much wrong? She also did not know she was even meant to live. The girl reflected upon all the many people she had killed, including her own mother or genetic template. But still, she'd survived this far. Could that mean something? After several hours in the darkness, there appeared a crack of light in the ceiling, about 4 feet above their heads. The two shielded their eyes and prepared themselves for whatever would come next. There was no way they could have anticipated what would appear at the top of their cell. Although it was difficult to see, some kind of ladder had mechanically descended into the pit. It was impossible to know what they would find outside, but they could face anything if it meant escaping its stifling darkness. Devon squinted against the painful beams of light as he climbed upwards. Meta followed closely behind. Upon reaching the room above, they saw a small figure at a control panel off to one side. Their eyes were still reeling from the transition into the bright light, and they were unable to make out anything other than a dark form. It had opened the hatch and lowered the ladder electronically, and began to quickly lead them away from their cell down a hallway. Come on, we've got to get out of here, a child's voice urged. Man, that voice sounds really familiar, Devon thought, but where is he leading us? Gradually, Devon's eyesight returned. Meta's more sensitive eyes still had not, so she took Devon's hand to keep from getting separated. He felt awkward for a moment until his regained vision revealed more familiarity in their rescuer. I know this kid, but from where? This is really starting to bother me. Hey kid, thanks for rescuing us, but where are we going? Devon demanded, slowing his pace. We need to get as far away from Tartarus as we can, the boy responded. If we want to live, we need to run. At this point, Meta's vision had come back to her. Hello, little Devon, she thought. The three carefully looked around a corner and turned right. This was all totally unfamiliar to Devon, so they had to trust their guide. Just then, he felt a horrible shiver pass through his body. It was as though there were some palpable presence touching him, but obviously that was silly. The young man was never superstitious or anything. Even now that he was a Christian, he had a perfectly clear grasp of what was real and what was simply fantasy. However, the chill, whispering voices, could it all have been in his head? In response to an especially strong, menacing sensation, Devon whipped his head to the right. There, he caught sight of a very strange and apparently out-of-place room. It actually looked like some sort of temple, buried beneath the American desert sands in this high-tech terrorist organization. If he did not know better, He would have said that it was some kind of pagan shrine for sacrificing living creatures to dark gods, or something. Many satanic symbols and artifacts lined the structures. Everything was considerably freaky. What was Tartarus doing? Before they could more carefully examine the room, the young child pulled them past in their escape. Devon was still hesitant about following him. It was not as though he did not trust him, but he and Meta could not simply retreat after everything they had seen. A short way past the ominous temple, Devon slowed his pace to a walk. We can't run. We have to destroy this place. Nordis cannot be allowed to continue his evil ways.
You can't. There's nothing you can do to touch him. He's invincible. You'll just get killed.
The boy was clearly terrified. Devon stopped moving. Go ahead. Get out of here. You should go to safety. This place is really dangerous. I can't leave, though. If I don't stand to fight, Tartarus will run over everyone in their path. Lots of people will die. The young escort shook his head ardently.
You don't understand. His new power is beyond anything you can fight. He'll kill both of you. He's darkness.
The boy's right. Norda's voice boomed. Devon's heart jumped, and he flipped around to face the man. Meta also readied for action. The small boy yelped and hid behind the two warriors.
He's a psycho!
Indeed I am, Nordis laughed. That's the only way to get ahead in this world. The man was obviously different from the last time they had met. A tangible, dark aura seemed to be originated from his body, and his words were more ominous than ever before. He was wearing a long black cloak, with several ragged strips of black material hanging in several places. His eyes were the most frightening aspect of his appearance. If these dark orbs were the portal into the soul, Nordis' soul was in another world entirely. Nordis, it's Judgment Day. Everything you've done, all the people you've killed, they all declare you guilty. Guilty? Guilty of what? Do you curse God for the death of enemies of the country, or for allowing an earthquake to destroy families? That's different. You're not God. Aren't I? Why don't you ask that boy if he thinks I'm God? What do you say, Perseus? Devon recoiled in shock with a sudden realization. This boy, of course he knew him. Devon turned to their rescuer. Wait, you're... me? Devon's clone nodded despondently. I'm just a clone. They told me I only exist for my link to the other side. No, that's not... You finally figured it out, Nordis commended. 10 years ago, I wanted you. I wanted you so bad. When I couldn't have you, I made my own you with your genetic information. Now he's about the same age as you were when we tried to take you. 9, I believe? So much began to make sense. That explained why Lycus had taken his blood. But why? What could such a group of terrorists want with one kid? It was also remarkably disturbing that they had no moral qualms with creating life just to be enslaved to their purpose. Why would you want me? Devon demanded. My father, who founded Tartarus many years ago, believed that all legends were based on actual occurrences, Nordis began. Some have proven to be pure myths or made-up stories with no historical foundation. However, our researchers have discovered some unexpected power behind many of the legends, one of which is the legend of Perseus. The son of a god, slayer of monsters. His exploits were famous across the world. In truth, this legend was based off an actual individual, Persich, your ancestor. Although the paternity jury's still out on the involvement of any deity, he was a man of great renown whose physical attributes were beyond the capabilities of normal humans. Our scientists have chased down links to the supernatural many times, with no fruit to show for it. But this time, your genes unlocked a whole new world for Tartarus. Devon felt severely violated. His own body had been copied and used as a tool for Nordis' nefarious schemes. This place was seriously messed up. And what did that mean for the clone? Did it have a soul? The soul isn't in the DNA, or is it? For a moment he began to relate to Meta a little, before his concentration went back to Nordis. Tartarus has 3 deep research sectors: the genetics division, the mechanical division, and the energy division. The genetics division allowed us to manipulate things and people on a molecular level. The mechanical division developed a technology far surpassing anything available on the planet. But the energy division was established after our researchers found an incredible discovery inside your blood. You have a third helix of DNA. What? Devon exclaimed in shock. That's impossible. What does that even mean? Nordis was clearly enjoying his unconventional friend's bafflement. I believe the original Perseus would have had a full third strand of genetic code, but over time, much of this information has been lost. You only have bits and pieces of the third helix, but it was enough. Devon was absolutely staggered by this claim. If it were true, just what was he? Afraid to even learn more, he still asked for elaboration. Enough for what? A connection to true, interdimensional, spiritual energy was uncovered. We were able to harness it for the purpose of powering our machinery and weapons. When in use, it took the form of a bluish glow. Although its applications were endless and extremely effective, it could be destabilized by substantial forces. However, detonation doesn't produce radiation. That's why there hasn't been any fallout from you destroying all my stuff! Not sorry about that, by the way, Devon retorted. That must be why it didn't explode when I was touching the hydrant in the back of my car. It reacts to me. Nordis continued speaking. We created a clone of you as a sort of portal so we could have as much access to this power as we needed. This energy, though very useful, was not exactly what we were looking for. It comes directly across the dimensions as pure energy. There are many applications, but it's just not the destructive force that Tartarus requires to make my vision a reality. By researching the occult and spiritual sciences, we developed a kind of technological sorcery. Finally, the perfect darkness was complete. With control over my newfound power, I will... Can you pause the monologue for just a minute? Devon interrupted. I can't help but think you just wasted a lot of time and money. I mean, people contact dark forces and stuff with a Ouija board all the time. I'm starting to think there are things on the other side that want to come in, and they just need some willing idiot for them to control.
Shut up!
Look, your plans aren't going to work this time. We're getting your power source out of here, and then we're going to defeat you. Darkness doesn't stand a chance. Nordis smiled, unintimidated. Actually, my plans already worked. Remember the technological sorcery I was talking about? Using rituals from the dark arts, I've imbued myself with a corrupted serum made from your DNA. I am no longer a mortal human. I am a god. I no longer have any use for that little brat. The commander lifted his hand, and a twisting mass of dark energy rose up from the floor with an appearance similar to black liquid. It surrounded the little clone, and he fell dead to the floor. Devon and Meta immediately kneeled by his side. Little Devon, no! Devon glared at the psychopathic madman. Although he did not like the fact that he had been cloned for evil purposes, this tiny version of him was a living human being, right? The boy did not even have a chance to fight back. He was just thrown out like garbage when they were done with him. Why? Why do you always kill? You brought him into the world, and then you killed him. Tartarus' supreme leader ignored his accusations and grew more excited as he elaborated on his achievements.
I have no need of any of you. I can touch the other side myself. This power, you cannot stand before me. I am invincible. I have finally become a god. I am Hades.
A blast of dark energy erupted upward from the man's body, disintegrating a wide hole through the bunker and all of the earth above. The sun shone through the gap down upon him. This light was barely noticeable due to the choking darkness coming from Nordis' presence. He then slowly levitated up to the desert surface. Devon and Meta had been knocked down by the shockwave and were still getting to their feet while Nordis escaped through the ceiling. They did not understand any of what was going on. All this sorcery and spirituality did not even seem real. There could be no arguing with the effects it was having on the world they could see. Meta, we have to stop him. He's not going to rest until the world is in his evil grip, and I think he might have the power to do it, Devon shouted. I don't know if we have a chance, but we're the last hope. We will try our best. We have to. The two followed signs to exit the headquarters as fast as possible and descended a set of stairs into the late afternoon sun. Looking around quickly, they spotted Nordis. The man walked slowly away from Tartarus' base. As he moved, arid zone-dwelling plants within a 30-feet radius of him withered and died. Devon and Meta began to approach him from behind. He turned his head halfway to see them, then uttered in a gravelly, almost otherworldly voice.
And Hades said, "Let there be darkness."
With that, a large semicircle spread across the land and sky, tinting everything within a deep reddish black. The sun became nearly invisible through the darkness. A dank, hideous chill settled into the area, with Nordis at the epicenter.
Now do you see why your pitiful hopes are utterly fruitless? I can absorb any energy within this field, and use it to become more powerful. Even the sun's rays are mine for the taking. Soon there will no longer be light, only darkness. No power on earth can stop me.
He looked up to the sky and spread his arms wide. A screaming whirlwind began to form within the zone of darkness.
I'm going to steal the light inside you, Devon. Watch it become darkness before your very eyes. Feel your spirit rip from your body. All life force within my domain is mine for the taking.
He threateningly stretched out his hand toward Devon, but nothing happened. The young man shrugged. There's nothing.
Looks like the human spirit can't be absorbed easily by plant and animal energy. I suppose I'll have to pull it from you with physical contact.
The powerful being began to slowly walk toward Devon. The whirlwind was almost deafening, and the terrifying presence of this entity grew nearer and more overwhelming. There's something about him that's not of this world, Devon thought. I don't even know what he is anymore. The young man emptied his clip of ammunition at Nordis' face, but it seemed to deflect off of a dark force field. The enemy raised his hand, and liquid-like bolts of dark energy flew toward Devon. He dodged, and the sand where the attacks hit disintegrated into nothingness. Holy cow! Is that antimatter, or something even more sinister? Devon continued to evade Nordis' blasts until he realized something. Wait, he doesn't want to kill me. He wants to absorb my power. Why is he firing at me? The energy attacks kept coming until Devon was pinned against a rock formation. So that's what he wanted, to box me in. Nordis walked toward him, like a specter out of a nightmare, until only a few feet away. He raised his hand up in front of him and began reaching out.
Come on, Devon. Don't fight me. It will be easier for both of us if you just give in.
Never! Just as he was about to press his hand against Devon's chest, he was interrupted by a clash from behind. Meta had plunged forward with her katana from behind him, and nearly reached his body before being halted by the dark force field. Nordis looked blankly at her.
I don't care about you. Whatever they've done to you, it doesn't change the fact that you're just another of my monsters. Your life force is no more worth taking than that of a rattlesnake. Be gone.
He fired a series of dark energy pulses point blank at the girl, but she did a very acrobatic flip to evade. She sprinted in a large circle, outrunning more projectiles, and came in for another attack. I may be a monster, but I care about Devon. I will die before I let you kill him. With that, Meta came in for another strike. She made several slashes left and right, but they went no further than Nordis' shield.
I have had enough of your meddling, creature,
he stated, and unleashed a radial blast of his power. Meta was sent flying, and landed unconscious in the sand some distance away. The tyrant turned back to Devon.
Now, where were we?
Devon was still standing resolute, staring defiantly at his foe. God has always used humans to accomplish his deeds. He used Gideon to defeat an army. He used David to defeat Goliath. He used Moses to defeat the Egyptian Empire. Now, he's going to use me to defeat you. Devon's body began to emit bluish light, and his feet started to leave the ground. As long as I'm alive, I give myself over to the real God, the one who won't let you wipe out everyone on this earth. With that, Devon was encased in light blue energy armor. It consisted of plates which covered his whole body in a thin, transparent layer. Levitating about a foot above the ground, he extended his right hand outward. A large broadsword materialized, starting from the handle and moving outward to the tip.
Now things are starting to get interesting.
Nordis exclaimed.
Let's see how long the light can last against omnipotent darkness.
He launched a bolt of dark energy at the transformed hero, but Devon cut through it with his sword. He flew forward like a flash and swung his weapon with 2 hands. Nordis raised his left hand to bolster his shield with a stain of darkness. There was a resounding clash, and the shield was at risk of shattering. The villain quickly fired another projectile with his other hand to counter, but Devon dashed backward and flew in a circle around him. Nordis fired more volleys, but Devon easily dodged. He then ascended several yards up and dove down with another powerful blow. The Neo-Druid raised both hands with his energy to defend himself. After this clash, Devon attacked madly, with slash after slash, pounding left and right to overpower his enemy's resistance.
This is for Amy, and Percy, and Kugyo, and every single person you've ever killed or ruined their lives!
Nordis was genuinely beginning to fear that he would be defeated, until he saw it open. In the last move of desperation, he dropped his dark barrier and reached out his hand, touching Devon's chest with his palm. The young man froze, completely paralyzed. Nordis' hand had passed right through Devon's armor and clothing, and pressed up against his skin. The avatar for Hades smiled an evil grin.
I have you now, Persich. You never stood a chance to me. Darkness will always triumph over your pathetic god. Where is he now? Will he come and save you? With your power, my darkness will spread across the entire world. Every single human being will worship me, or die.
Devon was helpless in the grasp of Nordis. His arms were paralyzed at his sides and his spine contorted, forcing his head to look with widened-out eyes up into the air. He could feel his life force being sucked away from him. Growing weaker by the second, the world seemed to close in all around. Was this how it ended? His death? And the end of the known world at the hands of a recreated evil god? Just then, the helpless young hero felt something press up against his back. Without having to see, he knew what it was. He could feel her. Meta had come in close and touched her hands against him.
I won't let you die, Devon. Take my life. The only reason I'm alive is because of you. I may just be a soulless creature, but I can find a reason for my existence if I sacrifice myself for you. I'm...
She laid her head on Devon's back and wrapped her arms around him. With that, the hero suddenly felt a surge of energy. Nordis was pulling Meta's life force from her through Devon, and he could feel it coursing through his body. He could feel her spirit, her immense power, and her love. Devon could feel his strength returning. His desire to go on had come back. A smile came to his face, and he looked into Nordis' eyes. The maniac was filled with fear.
What's going on? I have you in my power!
Sorry, that power isn't yours anyway. There are forces far beyond your and my comprehension. I can't let you continue to play around with that demonic power on this world right now, though. Devon released a pulse of energy which pushed Nordis away. At that point, Meta had collapsed to the ground behind him. Devon picked her up and gently flew a number of feet away. He set her down on a sand dune and whispered into her ear, "Thank you." Then, the hero returned to the battle. Devon soared in at full speed and began to attack with renewed vigor. Nordis blocked with his dark energy as a shield as fast as he could, but was no match for the flurry of strikes. After the furious attack, Devon reeled back and plunged his sword forward with a lengthened shout. Nordis put all of his power as a shield between the blade and his body, but with blinding light, the divine weapon began to push through the darkness. The demonic conduit of a man began to scream with exertion and terror as Devon's own yell rose in intensity. Then, suddenly, the large sword blasted through the shield with a huge explosion of energy that encompassed both of them. Now returned to his normal form, Devon walked to where he had placed Meta. She was still not moving. He kneeled next to her and laid his hand on her forehead. With that, she came to. Her eyes darted around until she saw her companion beside her. "Hey," he said calmly, and offered her his hand. She took it, and he helped the girl to her feet. Standing atop the sand dune, they watched the sun set without a word. Only a short time ago, the two were afraid they would never see the sun again. Now it glowed with a beauty which could only be understood by one who had been imprisoned in darkness without hope of ever experiencing light again. Devon suddenly realized he was still holding Meta's hand, and quickly removed it. "Sorry," he mumbled. After a second, she placed her hand in his again. Devon continued staring out into the desert. Suddenly, he was more afraid than he had been when battling Nordis. His pulse increased, and he could feel his forehead and back sweating. How could he say this? What if he screwed up? All he knew is that what he felt for Meta, as well as what he felt within his own heart, was real and strong. Without turning to face the girl, he cleared his throat and began to speak. I'm not completely sure if this is right, and I don't know how you feel either. Maybe I'm crazy, but all the time we've spent and everything I've seen, I mean, what I'm trying to say is... He turned his head to look at her and found himself staring into her violet eyes. I love you.
I
Her voice cracked.
love you too.